Hi, I'm Nick.
And I'm still not Josh.
And this is the PUDs Podcast. Back again with Ashley. Hi, I'm Nick.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the PUDs Podcast. All right, so what's up? You're back again to continue our New Hampshire 48 discussion.
Yes.
So sitting in for Josh once again.
Yes, we'll talk about the second half of the 48 tonight, which, I don't know, there's a lot of hikes that we can go pretty in depth about in that last half.
Yeah, there's some interesting ones in the latter half.
Yes, for sure. Some kind of just like we did them just because we had to check it off the list, but definitely some very memorable ones to talk about.
Yep, so she's sitting in for Josh again. It sounded like Josh had rave reviews about you, so that was good to hear.
Coming from you, Josh, that means a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it was much appreciated. It'll add to your podcasting confidence now. So I guess we'll get into the scramble. So what happened this weekend, even though we were pretty much together this weekend?
So we had some housewarming parties. We checked out our friends Lauren and Mark's new house.
Friends of the podcast, Lauren and Mark? Maybe. I don't know if they listen to the podcast. They know we have a podcast now, though, so it's a start.
Either way, we checked out their new house that they just built in Cranston, which is absolutely beautiful. They had a nice
gorgeous home.
Housewarming party there. And then we went to Kelly and Pat's house in Cumberland.
Avid podcast listeners, PUDs Podcast listeners, I should say.
Yes. And they just redid their kitchen and it looks awesome. They did a great job with that. So got to see some pretty houses, new houses, got to spend the day pretty much in Rhode Island most of the day.
Yeah, back in my home state.
Yep.
It's kind of odd.
Yeah, one thing.
Not that it's that far away. To be fair.
It's another state, I guess. But one thing that was definitely something different with having Rylan with us is as she's gotten older, she doesn't nap in the car quite as easily as she used to. So she had her first nap at home and then she takes 2 naps now. So we knew her second nap was going to be when we were on the road, most likely going from Lauren and Mark's house to Kelly and Pat's house. And that's about a 30-minute drive. So we're like, okay, she can take a quick little nap, enough to kind of get her through the rest of the day. And of course, she was babbling in the car pretty much most of the way.
Yeah, she didn't want to go to sleep.
No. So, I mean, she's older now. And
she has much more awareness of what's going on. And she knows when stuff is going on. She wants to be a part of it.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So she probably slept like 15 minutes. So she didn't really get much of a second nap, but that's okay. She had a great time at both houses and seeing different faces.
She was trying to climb Lauren's stairs. She climbs stairs now, and Lauren had some serious stairs in her house, and I think Rylan just wanted to go to the top of them.
Yes.
So we caught her in time.
Yep, that was right as we were about to leave. She decided she wanted to climb the stairs, and she had a great time playing with Kelly and Pat's 2 pugs, Otis and Stitch. She really enjoyed playing with them, and they definitely liked playing with her too.
Oh yes, they did.
She also had a great day.
Especially the younger one, Otis, was really just like, I think they just thought she was a dog, basically.
I mean, it makes sense. She crawls on all 4s. She's small.
She barks. Just kidding.
But pretty good weekend, and then just kind of chilled out on Sunday.
On Friday, we actually had my cousin Valerie over that was up from North Carolina with my cousin Ricky, so that was a lot of fun too. Just really chill night, just kind of catching up and stuff. So good to see my family, and my mom was over too, so that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I think that was pretty much it. And we got Rylan's first birthday coming up this weekend, so that's been a lot of planning and kind of gonna come together. I think we're gonna have like 40 or so people here, so it'll probably be one of the bigger gatherings we've had at our house, but it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Actually, by the time this episode is out, probably will be after her first birthday party, but we're definitely excited for it. It's going to be Hungry Caterpillar themed, which will be cute and a lot of fun. I can't wait to see how she reacts to like everybody watching her and singing and her smash cake. So
yeah, I think she's going to be shy. Then she's going to be shy. Then she's going to be a little ham, I bet.
Probably.
She's probably going to like it by the end.
That's usually what happens.
Yeah, so that's kind of our focus. Yeah, so that's kind of what's been going on. This is just sort of the next week after the last episode that me and Josh recorded, so not too much new has happened. And we get to see the Rogers' lovely home last night. So that was a lot of fun. We brought some pizza over. Beautiful house over there in Tiverton. Finally got moved in, finally settled. Good to see them in a house. Good to see Josh in a house. Good to hang out in a house that's his own, that they've been talking about and kind of waiting on. Like he was saying, it was a 3-year process. So congrats to them again for finally getting in their beautiful new home.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. Definitely, it was so great to be able to see them, like Nick said, see them in their home. They definitely looked so happy and like just relieved to finally be there, and it was great.
Definitely. Alrighty, so yeah, that's what's been going on. And I guess we'll get back into our main topic in the second half of our 4,000 footer journey. So I think where we left things off, we had just finished Mount Hale in winter of 2018. That's where you pulled your groin or something as we were starting to hike up the trailhead in the middle. And it was, I believe we figured out it was President's Day weekend in 2018. Yeah, and we had the whole fun trip trying to get up to that house that was around Newfound Lake. Then my car got stuck in a ditch and we had to get it towed out, which was probably more memorable than the actual hike to Mount Hale itself. But yeah, Hale was our number 24 peak. A long slog kind of there in the winter. It's like 4.4 to just do the summit in the summer, but it adds like another, I guess, 3.8 each way really of road walk if you're actually going to do that, or 2.8, I can't do math, to do that in the winter. So it turns into like sort of this 10-mile thing. We were feeling good at this point. I think we had done half of them. It was definitely a pretty big milestone. It looks like, actually, because I just know when we did the next peak, but we didn't do anything really earlier in the spring. The years since, and especially recently, I hike in shoulder season a lot, but in the whites for sure. Like, I think most people that grid and stuff will say that the worst month to hike in is pretty much like April. You're kind of dealing with mixed conditions. The snow's starting to melt, so the trails are a mess. That kind of happens earlier in March through April. A lot of times river crossings can be really bad, and like I said, it's just you can end up with a mix of conditions from snow up top and ice to just bare ground on the bottom. So just kind of a pain in the butt. Our next trip would sort of be Memorial Day 2018, which me and my dad kind of talked about hiking before this. I think because he was starting to read Not With or Without Peril, or Not Wow With or Without Peril. I think I have With or Without You stuck in my head because of the song, the
Not
U2
Without
song.
Peril.
It's called Not Without Peril. Yeah, I've been covering With or Without You by U2 lately, so I think that's just stuck on my brain. The name of the book is Not Without Peril. It's a really good kind of collection of stories that just sort of discusses like tragedies. I'm saying it sounds super depressing, but tragedies and sort of the history and different deaths sort of specifically around the presidential range of the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So I think we had been reading that, and there was a particular story. I think the gentleman's name was Donald Barr. I might be incorrect on that. But there's a story about him and his son sort of hiking Mount Madison, and unfortunately he like can't make it to Madison Hut, and I think he gets hypothermic and kind of ends up passing away. So somehow, I don't know if this story just stuck a chord, I think because of me and my dad hiking together, and we kind of made a pact sort of in that winter to kind of hike Mount Madison. My dad was never in fantastic hiking shape, I would say. He was always really stubborn and stuff. And he always got into summits, but we always really enjoyed hiking together. So sort of one part of this pact was that he was going to actually try to get into like significantly better shape to do Mount Madison. Since me and Ash did Adams and that lingered in our heads so long, like we just knew that terrain was super rough. And I just wanted to make sure that he was prepared for it. So we ended up kind of heading up to Mount Madison. We agreed to sort of hike it and stuff. Do you have any opinions on this point or whatever?
So Mount Madison was definitely a very memorable hike. I would say, I think going up until we hit the Madison Hut, I don't really remember too much of that. I think it was just like a pretty steady, strenuous climb, but nothing that really sticks out. But I do remember that when we got to the hut, I know it was very windy that day. Yeah, so backstory, another thing that I always remember about this is that year, and I mean, it's always like this in the presidential range, especially the northern presidentials when you're watching weather, but the weather was like literally all over the place. So we planned on taking Friday Memorial Day weekend 2018 off and then come back on Monday.
it left us like 3 days of hiking, or basically 3 full days of hiking
so
if we wanted to. So we
hiked it on Friday.
Yeah, and we ended up picking Friday because the weather literally looked like shit the rest of the weekend. Like I think it actually got really cold on Saturday. I think it actually was like maybe sleeting on top of Mount Washington, or the forecast was calling for it. Sunday also looked pretty awful, and Friday ended up being the good day. But there also was like insane winds. Like I remember Nate on the way home, like specifically checked the observatory, and like the peak wind gust for that day was like 96 miles per hour or something. Like it was, or 92 miles an hour. It was definitely in the 90s. Mount Washington, granted, is about 1,000 feet higher probably than Mount Madison.
Still though, very exposed, but the presidentials.
But the point being is that it was very, very windy. And if you've never experienced a wind forecast like that, I think people notoriously overestimate the wind speed of situations. Like people will be like, oh my god, there's like 90 mile per hour gusts or 80 mile. Like realistically, a 90 mile per hour gust is like enough to be very dangerous. Like even I'd say that day I'm trying not to be hypocritical, but I would estimate that there were some 40 to 50, if not 60 mile per hour wind gusts by the time we hit Madison. It was windy enough that was a little bit heavier than I am now, but like I'm around like 6 foot, like 200 pounds, 190 pounds. And like it was blowing me around like no problem. Like it felt like someone was shoving you like a couple feet, like horizontally across the ground.
Well, wait, let's take a step back and I guess maybe say who was with us on this hike. Because I'm
always bad at remembering
it's okay.
that. So
that will kind of make the story make a little more sense. So, I mean, it was the usual suspects, me, Nick, his dad, Nate, and then my sister Hannah joined, and my dad joined.
Yep.
So we had a good group with us. Yeah. So going up, I don't really remember anything too much up until we reached the hut. Just pretty much like any typical.
Yeah, we went up Valleyway, which is funny because I hiked that trail so much now, going up to my trail for maintenance just already. But that's generally, if you're heading towards Madison Hut or towards Adams or Madison, the two common routes are Valleyway and Airline Trail, which both go up Duran Ridge. Airline breaks tree line a lot sooner. Valleyway really doesn't until you like sort of get to the hut, and even then it's sort of in the trees.
But I don't really remember breaking
Airline's
out
much more exposed, basically. So with the wind that day, I decided that we basically wanted to take Valleyway up.
Yes. So we got to the hut. Like Nick said, I really don't remember there being, like, you couldn't really see. There weren't a whole lot of views until you broke out and got to the hut. And at that time of year, Madison Hut is a pretty nice, good size hut. It has like full bathrooms. It has food. You can stay there. Obviously you have to make reservations to stay there, which is definitely something we'd like to do at some point. But it was nice. I remember we got there, we were able to kind of like drop our packs,
and what I was going to
interject
with was that they just opened the hut. They were literally AMC caretakers that were going up there. The hut had literally they were in front of us that day preparing to open up the hut for the season. So generally, I just don't want people to misconstrue. If you're up there Memorial Day weekend, it can be a hit or miss, I think, generally, on when the huts are actually open. Depends on how much snow they have and a number of factors. Okay. So that particular year, on Memorial Day, they were hiking up that Friday to open up the hut. So, like, they weren't making food or anything yet, but at least we could use the bathrooms and get water.
Okay. I don't remember those little details. I just remember going into the hut.
I do, and I was just going to mention it.
Okay. But I do remember going in. It was nice to be able to use, like, an actual toilet, versus just going on the trail, which I don't mind doing either. But it was nice to use like an actual toilet. And I think at that point were we hearing like reports from people that it was super windy at the top? I can't remember how we decided that it was super windy.
Number one, you could like physically actually hear the wind. So if it gets windy enough, especially up in the mountains, it almost sounds like there's like a train or something. Like, I don't know how to equate the sound of it, but you can hear the wind gusts coming as they're sort of hitting the ridgeline. And then the other thing is that we passed two guys that did Adams earlier that morning and were going to do Madison. They bailed on Madison because Adams, like, it was windy enough. And again, Adams is probably about 500 feet higher than Mount Madison. It's a pretty significant amount. And I think just with the wind direction, Adams was probably getting hit even worse with wind than Madison was. They were like kind of spooked enough that they were like, we're just gonna go down Valleyway and get our butts out of here.
Yeah.
So that was disconcerting.
I think between like what we were hearing from other people, what we could hear ourselves and what we could see ourselves, we knew it was going to be kind of tough going up to Madison. And I think we kind of came together as a group and we were like, all right, do we want to do this? Do we want to play it safe and not do it? We decided ultimately, I think I remember your dad being like, let's do it. Like,
yeah, we talked. I know when the AMC caretakers, we were talking to him and he's like, he was like looking at, he knew the forecast that morning and stuff. And he's like, I would go. He's like, if you guys want it to be easier on yourselves, though, he suggested to take off our backpacks.
Yes, I do remember leaving our packs.
And it was like cloudy. It wasn't like blue skies or anything, but the cloud ceiling was like well above us. So it was kind of just clouded, but you could see and have really great views despite that.
I do remember there being awesome views. You could see like the Great Gulf.
Yeah, the Great Gulf.
Yeah, you could see that really well. You could see Star Lake, which we didn't. I mean, I personally wasn't very familiar with Star Lake at the time, but it was awesome.
Yeah, we didn't. I don't know why we didn't go there while we were up there that day.
I think we just didn't really know about it much yet.
I was thinking it was funny. I remember your dad asking. He's like, "Why is there like a helicopter landing pad up here?" It was just because of the reflection and stuff. Like he thought it was like some sort of open area, but it's actually just Star Lake. That's sort of behind. It's not behind Madison Hut. It's kind of like a little off the trail from it. When you go past it on the way up.
It's kind of in between like Madison and Adams.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, I remember climbing up, and again, it's full scramble, like giant boulder fields, similar terrain to what we saw when we did Adams, very similar to that. So I remember kind of like crawling our way up to the top. And I remember when we did finally get to the top, it was so windy. We'll have to find like a video or something. I think I have a video somewhere.
Yeah, I have some other videos of it.
Of us at the top.
It was especially once you poked over the summit. Like there's a couple giant cairns on the actual summit of Madison, and it was insanely windy. Like I don't think anybody actually was standing up for more than a couple seconds.
I remember we just
kind of crawled and like huddled.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, to give you an idea of how windy it was like seriously windy. Like we're not exaggerating. Like it's not like we're out in like a reckless situation.
No,
like we kind of conferred
like
together.
Unsafe,
and we had a group of us together. And from what I remember, it was more like it would gust like really hard, and then it'd be more subsided, like maybe 15, 20 mile per hour winds, and then all of a sudden, because it was probably just a storm finishing moving through. And it was getting cold the next day, but like every once in a while you could literally like hear like a gust of wind just coming, and it would just rip up the side of the ridge and up Mount Madison and really whip you around pretty good. Didn't want to be holding onto your phone out or anything like that, because it definitely would just chuck it like probably 200 yards into the Great Gulf, the way the wind was probably blowing out of like the northwest or the north. And for those of you who like haven't seen Mount Madison, it's a super picturesque mountain in the White Mountains. It's probably one of the most like sort of scenic. A great description of it is if someone built a stone pyramid and then like blew it up into like thousands of tiny boulders. That's basically what it looks like.
Yeah,
it looks
like a perfect triangle.
This perfect sort of pyramid that's just sitting on sort of the northern presidential ridgeline. And it's really the northern sort of end of the presidential range. That was a good one. I mean, it was definitely got the adrenaline going. It was cool that we all made it. My dad was like super thrilled. It was probably my favorite hike I had with him, I got to say. And we had a good time up there. Like I don't think it actually even took us that long to get up and down. And my dad did really well with his sort of preparation and cardio. Like he was kind of at his own pace, but he never really fell behind. And
was this the hike he sat down and took out the hard-boiled egg at the beginning? It's
super funny. So since I've been up Valleyway, I don't know, 6 or 7 more times since this has happened, or probably even 8 or 9 times. But there's like a rock my dad sat on the way up and just like whipped out a hard-boiled egg as like a snack that he had
like
in aluminum
from his
foil.
Like flannel, like
he had a flannel pocket.
Like.
So I call it boiled egg rock now every time I like go by there. But I like remember that spot specifically just because it was just weird that he had a boiled egg like in his flannel pocket and just like broke it out and like started munching on it. Oh man.
Okay. Gotta fuel up while you hike.
But yeah, that was just a really fun hike, kind of a thrilling day. It was good to be back in the northern presidentials. We had only done Adams by that point and kind of were just utterly defeated and felt utterly defeated. Accomplished, but just defeated from the mountain.
I felt a little bit better about this one. I think when we ended it, I still felt that same like level of accomplishment, but just the overall hike was definitely more pleasant.
Yeah, I think it was getting a little bit easier. Like our footing was better, and I think we were getting better at sort of managing that type of terrain and just being better prepared. So it went pretty smoothly. It was another fun weekend. We didn't do any other really hikes. I think we just explored around Pinkham Notch and Lake Jackson, and we were staying at Jackson. That house had like killer views of the presidential range. You could see Mount Washington from the back deck, which is, granted, it had also mice like running through the walls. I think friend of the podcast, Nate, thought he had a mouse highway in his bedroom in the walls because you could just hear mice all night like scurrying around. So that was a downside, but another memorable thing just from when we did that hike. So I don't think it didn't take us too long to do this next one. This was another day trip. I remember because this was another one of those days where I think it poured like most of the time. Not while we were hiking, but we drove up in June, not too long after Memorial Day weekend, and we did Galehead, which You remember anything about Galehead?
Not really. I think the only thing I really remember is the Galehead. Is it Galehead Hut? Is that what it's called?
Yep,
I do
one
remember.
One of the AMC huts is there. It's the next one after Greenleaf Hut.
Yeah, okay. I do remember the hut and having some nice views from the hut, and we kind of stopped there briefly. Like, I think more so when we were coming down, I think we spent a little more time there. So that was cool. I do remember it being like a very quick hike. Like, I feel like it was like a less than like maybe a 5-hour hike total, which I know we haven't really talked about the duration of these hikes and how long they typically take, but 5 to 6 hours is pretty quick.
Yeah, depending the mileage. I mean, I actually went back and did Galehead by itself this winter, even though I kind of was kicking myself and wish I did it when I did the Twins, because I made good time doing the Twins. But yeah, it's like maybe 10 miles and like 2,500 feet. I'm gonna like ballpark it out there. A lot of it's flat. If you go by the Gale River Trail, I should say, that's probably the most common route. But we did pretty much the Gale River Trail. There is one very steep section coming up from the Gale River before you hit Garfield Ridge Trail. And then to your point, like Galehead Hut, where you break out, it's kind of a unique viewpoint. You can see sort of the edge of the Pemigewasset Wilderness. You can actually look out, sort of see Owl's Head, and you can actually see Loon if it's clear, and you can see the ski trails to give you some perspective on it. And you're kind of to the other side, to your left, where you break out is basically like the base of South Twin in this sort of like ravine that's kind of in there. So it's an interesting, unique view. That view from the hut's probably the best view that you're going to actually get from that hike.
Yeah, did we even have a view from the summit, or was it a wooded summit? I don't even remember. So
it's a totally wooded summit, and I'll throw in the caveat again recently, because I did that in the winter. You can actually cross a little, or it's easier to see, but there is a little lookout spot on Galehead that you can actually see Franconia Ridge from. It's sort of getting treed in, and I imagine if you had more snowpack than I did, you probably actually could get views from the summit. The one warning thing I'll say with that is that I was also poking around, and then I like literally fell into a spruce trap like knee to thigh deep in snow. And after that, I decided it was probably a better idea for me to stick on the pack trail. But there is views. I'm sure if you poke around, you know what you're doing. Like, I'm sure you can probably get a couple little peeks out, but again, not like Galehead Hut. And there is that one view right as you're approaching the summit where there's like a big lookout, kind of the same lookout from the hut, but you're higher up.
Okay. Yeah, no, that one's not as memorable to me. Again, I think it's one of those that we kind of just were checking off the list.
Yep.
One thing I do remember unrelated to the hike is on the way home from the hike, I remember we stopped at Woodstock and refilled some growlers.
Yep. Yeah, that's how much time. I think we finished the hike, and it was
very quick.
It might have even been only like 4 hours or something like that. And I think we were just like hauling that day because it was cooler out. It wasn't bad weather, and it was just
I remember being
crappy.
Comfortable. Like, I don't remember being like hot or cold. Like, I think it was just generally a pretty comfortable hike. But yeah, we stopped at Woodstock. I think just because we had, we drove all the way up there, and it was still pretty early. Yeah, so we stopped at Woodstock. I do remember that. Yeah, I think we sat at the bar and maybe had a beer or two and filled some growlers.
Yeah, it might have been like we started at 9 and finished at like 2:00 or something. We're like, oh, what do we do now?
Yeah,
we try to have this rule where it's like if we're at least in New Hampshire, like as long as the drive up, at least, or try to hike as long. So we made use of that. But yeah, Galehead, nothing too spectacular. Again, I think it is underrated because while the summit's viewless, like there are some pretty good spots for views where you can see South and North Twin, and it's kind of a perspective you don't really get anywhere else. So that's my little shout out for Galehead. Oh, and there's Grey Jays, like lots and lots of Grey Jays.
Yes, I do remember the
aggressive Grey Jays. So next, it's funny. I thought we would have done something between this, but this would have been coming up July of 2018. Again, we were at Newfound Lake. I think you couldn't come all week. You ended up coming later in the week, but I think was it Kaylee's bachelorette party?
What is this? July 2018?
Yeah.
What it was? So I think I didn't. So I remember maybe I didn't have enough vacation time.
Yeah, but you didn't come up for that because I know you came up on Wednesday night because we did this hike on the Thursday.
Because Kaylee's bachelorette was in 2015, so it definitely wasn't that.
Oh, never mind.
2018. Oh, you know what it was? No, I remember now. So.
Yeah.
Because we got married in October of 2018, so we were approaching our wedding. So for our wedding, we were going to take 2 weeks for our honeymoon, like 2 full weeks. And I just didn't have enough vacation time to take a full week in July and then 2 weeks in October. So that's why I only did part of the week.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
It took me a bit, but yep, that's the reason.
Yeah, and I should say I did a little bit of hiking by myself that week, but no new peaks. I think I did Eisenhower and Pierce again with Mike and my dad, and it was hot as balls. I remember that because I drank a ton of water. We had been eyeing this one for a while.
Is this the The Bonds?
One of the big ones. Yes, this is the Bonds Traverse.
This is a good one.
So if you're familiar with hiking the 48 and stuff, I mean, everybody's seen the pictures of On Cliff. A very common way to do it is to do it Bonds Traverse. At least I think it's probably the best way you could do it, other than doing something crazy like a Pemi Loop or whatever, which is technically mostly part of what a Bonds Traverse is. Basically, a Bonds Traverse, generally people start from the trailhead off the end of Zealand Road. So if you keep going past where Mount Hale is and stuff, go all the way to the end of Zealand Road, and you'll start there, and then you go basically all the way across the Pemigewasset Wilderness to the Lincoln Brook Trailhead, and you end on that awful trail that many people hate. My parents were kind enough, it was the Thursday, 2018, we're on vacation in Newfound Lake. We drove up early together. We were like geared up for the Bonds Traverse, and I'll kind of get more into it as we kind of go through the hike. But my parents followed us in a car, and we car spotted. So what that basically means is we drove with two different cars, and we left my car at the Lincoln Brook Trailhead, which is basically off the Kangamangas, the southern edge of the Pemigewasset Wilderness. And then we drove all the way up to Zealand Road with my parents. They dropped us off pretty early. It was probably like 5:30 or something like that. You kind of want to, it's a long day.
Should we go over, like, before we get into the nitty gritty, should we go into like the length of the hike just so people know, like,
yeah, I wish I was trying to think, I'm trying to think of my numbers on hand. I think it's
like 19 miles.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's about 19 miles. Cause, I know from from Bond Cliff out is still like 9 miles. And I can recorrect and edit.
I want
to
say it's like 18, 19 miles.
I think you're right. I think it's about 18 or 19 miles. And it's probably about 4,500 feet if you do it one-way traverse north to south. A lot of people do it out and back and actually don't do the full thing and dodge the walk out of Lincoln Woods Trail. Actually, I remember, I think I've been saying Lincoln Brook Trail. It's Lincoln Woods Trailhead that I meant to say. There's a Lincoln Brook Trail. That's why I'm going to mention it. And yeah, so basically you start north to south. Most people do that, and across that whole ridgeline, you end up pretty much checking out like notable things. The first thing you're going to hit is Zealand Hut and Zealand Falls, which Zealand Falls is right at the hut. Another AMC hut, the next one after Galehead Hut. After that, you can hit Z Cliff. When I say you can hit it, you don't have to hit it. It's not directly on the trail, but it's a short spur path. Z Cliff has like another sort of fantastic view, I think, out to Carrigan and whatnot. It's actually the cover of the Old White Mountain 4,000 Footer Guide. That's literally the cover of it, is just a view of a guy like at Z Cliff. It's a pretty epic view. And then you keep going, and eventually you'll make your way to Zealand, which Zealand is another one of those peaks, not too spectacular on its own.
It's a wooded summit.
It's got a nice sign that says Zealand that a lot of people take pictures of that kind of points to where the summit is, but another completely wooded summit. And after Zealand, you basically break out to an area where you could either get there by descending South Twin, or you could get there from approaching the Bonds Traverse from the south. But you get out to this sort of open area you're finally like above tree line. And I actually sort of forgot, Mike mentioned this to me, but there's like a pretty significant down and up from Zealand to Mount Guyot, which Guyot, I think that's pronunciation of it. It's Guyot. But it's not an official 4,000 footer, but basically you go down from Zealand again, you go up to Guyot, and you finally break out into this beautiful, like, above tree line area where it's notoriously windy, like, most of the time because of where it's located. So that's kind of, at that point, you're, like, actually, like, out in it. You can see Franconia Ridge in front of you. You can see sort of South Twin to your right. You can see the Bonds and West Bond, or Mount Bond and West Bond sort of to your left, and you check it out, and by that point, it's already a long day. By the time you've gotten there, it's kind of a relief when you actually get there.
Yeah, I have to say, I feel like up until that point, I feel like I was kind of just grinding, going through the motions, and then once we like broke through and had those views, I feel like I got like a second wind almost. And I remember too, the weather that day was like 10 out of 10. Again, like a beautiful day.
Yeah, it was a beautiful dry
not a cloud
July
in the
day.
sky. Yeah, dry.
Not very hot.
Yeah, like, I mean, for an 18, 19 mile hike, I don't think I was like super sweaty at any point during the hike. It was like perfect temperatures.
Yeah, and I should mention too, the reason a lot of people do these peaks as one go is like by the time you're out around the middle of the Bonds, it's like 7 to 9 miles, I'd say, around probably like an average of 8 miles or something, just to get to like where Bond is. So most people, by the time you get out to around Zealand, why they do Zealand on the way to the Bonds is because you're kind of really close to it. Like you've already had a long day. Like you can push it a little bit more and do the bonds or get out there. But no matter any way you slice it, like I think a lot of people end up doing these later, kind of like not like Owl's Head, but a lot of people pick the bonds to finish on number 1, I think, because it's absolutely beautiful where it is. And number 2 is it's a haul to get out there. Yes. Owl's Head is the only one, or Isolation are probably the only ones that compare to the feel of like just hiking along.
Just the overall remoteness. Yeah. Like you don't see like any roads or anything when you're doing that hike. And a lot of people too, I feel like will camp. Like some people will kind of make it to like Bond maybe, and then they'll camp and then finish the rest.
There's the Gio campsite that's like sort of south of Gio, where there's like I think it's called Gio tent site or something, but there's a spring over there and there's kind of a campground. So yeah, for sure. A lot of people will do it as an overnight. That's probably pretty common too. Just because it is a lot and you don't have to rush and worry about kind of getting back to your car when it's laid out and whatnot. But yeah, so that's a little background. And again, when we say like people usually do it with Zealand and usually do these string of peaks, that's kind of the fundamental reason why, is it's just a long day out there. So once you get to Gio, I remember we kind of poked around. I think we chilled out maybe just a little bit there and had some water and stuff. I remember it was super windy.
Yeah. I don't know if I remember it being windy, but
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it was.
Yeah. From then on, we kept making our way to, next, you kind of descend back towards where Mount Bond is. And if I remember correctly, I think there's just a spur path on the right. I don't even know if there's a sign saying like West Bond this way. And the thing is I think by that point we crossed into Pemigewasset Wilderness. And formerly there's like no signs. There's very sparse signs in wilderness areas, and the blazes are also a lot more sparse. That's just kind of how wilderness trail is maintained. So when you do cross into that, that's one thing to be mindful of. Like you'll see a sign, it'll be like I think literally like when you get to at one point, it just says Lincoln Woods and it doesn't say how far it is. It just is like, it's this way. It might be 9 miles. It might be 2 miles. Like you definitely need to kind of know your mileages and have an idea where you're going. There's no like sign for like Mount Bond or like any, it just is like,
I definitely remember the sign that said like entering the Pemigewasset Wilderness. Yep. I do remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's nice little, like, I think it's US Forest Service signs that say that. Yeah, so anyways, as you're heading towards Bond, there's a spur path on your right, and that'll actually take you up to West Bond, which is sort of this really little craggy spike. It's
very skinny. I remember there being not a lot of, it wasn't very wide at all at the top.
Sort of a little ledge. There's like a cairn, I think, on the back of it, or at least there was at that time. Yeah, and you're like looking out for perspective-wise to your west, you sort of have all of Franconia Ridge with like Liberty and Flume. You also have Owl's Head that's lurking down below and laughing at you because it's just a weird peak to get to. And then to the north, kind of coming around, you can see Garfield and you can see the Twins, and kind of the giant, probably South Twins sort of dominates the entire area. It's the biggest peak besides sort of Franconia Ridge. And then looking across, you got like the whole presidential range. Like I think at one point too, like all you can really see that's man-made, which is impressive, especially in New Hampshire because you see highways and crap everywhere. But you can literally just see the observatory on Mount Washington, and that's the only thing you can really see. That, and maybe like the Loon ski slopes. Other than that, you can't see anything man-made.
Yeah, you don't see any roads. I know that.
No.
Which is, I mean, I guess it depends on what type of person you are. I think it's really cool to be so far remote that you just don't see any roads. I guess that could be terrifying to some people, but definitely a very cool like wilderness feel for sure. You're definitely out there.
It feels a lot more now that we've hiked out there. It feels like the Adirondacks a lot. Yeah. When you hike into sort of the central wilderness area and there's just nothing around. But that's a topic for another time. But so we made our way up West Bond, and at that point too, and I should mention one of the most stunning things you can see is Bond Cliff itself, which looks like some sort of crazy like Lord of the Rings like fort remains or something, or like I'd say now like Game of Thrones, sort of like it looks like it could like be on that show. Like it's just this giant, exactly what it's described as, a giant cliff. And the one thing that I didn't get about it until we did it is it's sort of like, I almost equate it to like a mini Franconia Ridge. It's actually sort of this spine ridgeline, which a lot of people don't realize. Like as you're looking down it south, it just looks like kind of this like whale back sort of thing that just pops out of the Pemigewasset Wilderness. So great view of that from West Bond. I don't know how many pictures I took this day, probably so like hundreds. I still have some pictures like saved that I know I framed a bunch for a while, and you got a really cool one of Bond. I remember that from that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, West Bond was super cool. And then at this point, I remember it being pretty easy to get up to Bond from West Bond.
Yeah, I don't remember that being too bad. I feel like once we got to like West Bond, again, I feel like I was just like, okay, this is long, but it's awesome. Tiring, but yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah, it was just awesome at that point. And we left our packs too going up to West Bond to give you an idea too of how short it is. Like it's not very long to get up to West Bond from the main trail. But went back down, grabbed our packs, made up to Bond. I remember we hadn't seen any people for a while other than some AT hikers. And I remember there was a decent crowd of people on Bond, but I think they were all more going northbound.
Yeah, I don't think we saw anybody on West Bond. I think it was just us. I mean, again, it's a pretty tiny summit, but still, I think when we were coming down from West Bond, there might have been other people going up, but we didn't see anybody on the actual summit.
Yeah, so on Bond, another kind of similar view to West Bond, same kind of deal. Bond is more of sort of a rounded, sort of open summit. It's not very like sharp or spiny or anything like that. It's just kind of a big open summit area with just stunning views all around it. I remember it not being as impressive as West Bond or Bond Cliff. I think Bond Cliff and West Bond both probably have better views than Bond itself had, but it's still a 360-degree view. And by this point in the day too, I'll also point out, like, being in that sort of like almost open amphitheater feeling sort of thing of the Pemigewasset Wilderness and like the ring of mountains around you. You just take for granted views after a while. Like it just becomes normal that you're looking out and there's giant drop offs like everywhere into the wilderness. So you're kind of just like, oh, this is cool. Like we're just on a mountain that had fantastic views. I think we had some lunch at Bond too. I think we finally ate and like sat down for a bit. We were moving pretty good all day.
Yeah, I think we sat down and had lunch. Yeah, on Bond. I mean, I think we probably snacked and had water throughout, but like I think we like actually like sat down and kind of took our time on Bond.
Yeah, that about sounds right. So at this point, we're recharged a little bit, and we begin making our way down from Bond, and then back up to Bond Cliff, which I kind of remember being a decent climb.
It definitely looked so. When you're hiking, I feel like there's different situations where something looks so far away, but it's actually not that far away. Like, I think you've said this before, us as humans, we don't have really good judge of like distance, especially when it's perspective. So there's definitely been hikes where like, I'll be like, oh my God, we're going all the way over there. But then it's like, it's a lot closer than it looks. Yeah. But then I feel like there's also situations where you almost look like you could just reach out and touch it, but it's not close. And I feel like that's how I felt about going from Bond to Bond Cliff. Like it definitely was more of a climb and not as close as it looked like it was.
Yeah, and going down Bond, I recall being interesting too, because it's almost like a slide, not like a slide, like ledgy slide, but just tons of rocks and kind of feeling like you could literally slide off into oblivion in certain spots. Not like literally, it's not like it was a sheer drop or anything, but I remember being kind of like, oh, this is interesting.
We definitely had to take our time though, going down.
Yeah, it was hard to move up quickly. And then, you finally start climbing back up Bond Cliff, which is just incredible. It's got that, and it's, again, like, I don't know if Bond Cliff is actually the cliff, but like the famous cliff picture you see, that's like probably one of the most common pictures of hiking in the White Mountains you see, especially people finishing, is going out to the cliff that's on Bond Cliff. So we got up to that, and it's funny because I remember there was a group of other people up there, and they were like, no way are we going over the cliff. I got a picture of you pretty much near the end of it. I got pretty close to it, but I was like, if I went back, I would totally go over the edge of it now. But at that point, and like just where I was with hiking and heights and stuff, like I will attest that even people see pictures of it. I don't know what the drop off is, but it is a sheer long drop off.
And it's not a very like wide.
No, it's not wide like, at all.
Ledge either. Like, I mean, there's people who sit on the edge and do all these crazy things, but
yoga poses.
Yeah. Well, that was my yoga era. So I was very into yoga. I remember doing yoga poses on Bond Cliff, but not near the edge.
No. I think
I just put my arms up or something. I don't think I did anything too crazy on Bond Cliff.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple different ledges and stuff to go on, but there's definitely the one ledge that you see a lot, and it is literally like it drops off into oblivion. Like if you fell off the cliff at Bond Cliff, like you'd probably have a solid couple seconds to think about what you just did if you slipped. Like it's a pretty good ways down.
Yeah, let's not talk about that.
Again, from what I remember, yeah, it might be exaggerating a little bit if we.
No,
we will go back, and this is one that I haven't been back on. It's probably
a steep drop off.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes for a great picture. Just be safe.
Yes, it's a good photo op. Don't go out there by any means if it's wet or slippery.
No.
It
was a dry day. It wasn't super windy. It was a good day to take a picture.
If it was the day we're on Mount Madison, we would have been freaking out. Bond Cliff, definitely not a good hike to do if there's going to be bad wind gusts or thunderstorms. That's something I should throw out there. Like with any ridgeline hike, like the Presidentials, but Bond Cliff, I think a lot of people don't realize how long you're actually exposed to the weather too. Like it's pretty open ridgeline for a good chunk of the hike. So there's kind of nowhere to hide if you were to get out there in a thunderstorm. Yeah, so Bond Cliff we got to, and like by this point, I remember you asked me like, how long do we have back? And I was like 9 miles, and you're like, what? Because we've been hiking all day. It was probably mid afternoon, I would guess by that point. It's another thing I just wish I wrote down some of the times. I remember, I think it took us around like probably 10 or 11 hours.
I would say closer to 12 because we started at like 5:36 and we ended at like 5:36. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, it's 19.
And I would say that wasn't
miles.
like, and I mean, I would say we weren't rushing either. Like, you want to take your time. Obviously, there's the people that trail run and like are going for like fastest time on that. But I would say it's definitely a hike where you kind of want to soak it up too. Like, you're hiking that far out there to get out there. Like, enjoy it and take some time on Bond Cliff while you're out there. Enjoy it for sure.
Oh, but those last 9 miles, whew, like I would do the steepness of that hike all over again if I had to choose, to opt out of doing that last flat walkout at the end. That was torturous.
I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you. So the deal is once you get off Bond Cliff, you start kind of going down one steep section, I remember, off the summit, and then you kind of keep crossing over and you basically descend back below tree line. And yeah, you've got about 9 miles at that point to get back to the Lincoln Woods trailhead. So that was to get back to our car so we could go home, which is good motivation. So you keep going back down, and I remember really taking care of following sort of the trail and stuff because it is a wilderness area. It was just, we hadn't done as much, I think, just hiking in areas where trails aren't as well marked. I'm sure even by now with just how much many more people hike, it's probably really obvious. But I remember a couple spots, especially where it crossed some like drainages, being like, where are we going? And kind of having to double back and look a little bit. But the trail's like normal White Mountains trail. And then the very end of it, like the last 2 or so miles, you finally hit the Lincoln Woods Trail from the Bond Cliff Trail. And it follows an old railroad bed. So what it basically is like is being in the Blair Witch Project. Like
you're walking and walking and walking, and you feel like you're not going anywhere because everything looks 3 miles. Same.
I forget, but yeah, it's notorious. It has a reputation. They're going to be actually reconstructing part of it at some point, I guess, in the years coming. That's kind of a more recent thing. I don't know why, if because of erosion or whatever the deal is, but yeah, like it kind of has the reputation because it's always, usually most of the time when people hit it, it's like at the end of some long day. To get back to their car at the Lincoln Woods trailhead, usually from probably a Bonds Traverse or maybe even a Pemi Loop or something like that. And it's just flat and monotonous, and you just want to get back to your car. And usually by this point, you're like tired, thirsty. If you're Ashley, you're like dreaming of mozzarella sticks. That might or might not be back at the house when you get back. That's another story. But we were just thinking about food and just wanted to get back to our car. And that was another big, like, I feel like once we did that, it was a really good feeling. We bagged out like 4 more peaks that actually brought us up to number 30. So that was cool. So that was Zealand, West Bond, and Bond Cliff. Yeah. There's variation.
That was the most we ever did at once in a day.
Yes.
The most peaks we've ever done in a single day.
For sure. I was going to say there's different variations of that traverse too. Like sometimes people do it from different directions, but that's the one we did. That's probably the most common route that people tend to take to do a day Bonds Traverse. And like Ash was saying, like, don't feel pressure to tackle in one day if you don't want to, or you just don't think you want to take it slower, or you don't think you can do it in a day, or like you don't have to do that. Some people do it as an overnight. You could even do 2 nights out there. Like honestly, it's a long enough hike where you could stay at like Zealand Hut, like come in a later afternoon and then like camp at Gio and then like hike out the next day, and you still have a lot of hiking to do to get out on your last day. Still probably from Gio, it's like 10 or 11 miles really to get out.
Yeah. I think if we were to do it again, which I'm sure we will, I mean, I definitely want to get out there again at some point. I think I would opt to do an overnight. Yeah,
I agree with you. I do have like a Pemi Loop that I want to do on my list at some point, but I would for sure, I would want to do it as an overnight. So next, some less exciting peaks. And I should mention we're getting really close to our wedding at this point. So kind of a fun backstory. This brings us to... It was the weekend before, so I don't know if it was technically the end of September, the beginning of October. It was end of
September. Yeah, so I remember. Yeah, so we decided it was going to be a beautiful weekend. So we had decided, Nick, Mike, and we had decided to do a hike a week before our wedding. And I remember our moms were both like... Giving us shit. Oh my God, like, what if you get hurt? What if you fall? Like, what? I'm like, well... What if I fall anytime? Like, yeah, like just because it's like
well, what if you break your ankle or something? It's like it's going to be a bad situation no matter what. Yeah. Is it worse with our wedding coming? Like probably, but it kind of sucks anytime. But people are like, "Why are you hiking?" Like,
I just remember them being like, I say our moms, but I'm sure there are other people too, just kind of being like unsure of our decision to hike the week before our wedding. But.
Yeah, so we were catching some shit, but it was a beautiful day, and Mike didn't give us any shit. Mike thought it was fun. Mike, who turned us on to hiking the 4,000 footers when we talked about in the previous first half of the 48 episode.
This is when I feel like we started hiking more with Mike.
Yeah. Mike had just kind of gotten back into hiking again. Was also doing the 48. He finished a little bit before us, but we both finished in 2019. So we're kind of going through and mutually like picking like which peaks we still needed. And on this fine weekend day, we picked Whiteface and Passaconaway. Not some of the better known of the 48 probably. They kind of sit between like the Kangamangas Highway, the sort of the central part of the Kangamangas Highway, and sort of the lakes region. Whiteface has decent views from some ledges. Passaconaway is another completely wooded summit, but it does have this really sick outlook that looks towards like Hedgehog and Potash Mountain and sort of the Kank. You can see Carrigan and whatnot too.
I remember the start of the trail too. Didn't it go through like somebody's like backyard?
Yes.
I thought that was different because that was the first time we had seen something like that.
Yeah, it starts at the Ferncroft Trailhead, which you can also, there's a bunch of little peaks from there. There's some current 52 with the views, some decommissioned 52 with the views. There's like the Bowl Natural Research Area that's over there. To your point, I believe you cross through private property, like someone's farm or something on the beginning of it.
I just remember it being a very like pretty area.
Well, they have a sign that's like hikers welcome. It's like no trespassing, but then there's like a blip that's like, oh, if you're hiking, like it's fine. So you're good to go. So yeah, just shouting out to just be respectful of that. Like there are cases actually in the mountain that's coming up next where there was private landowners that used to kind of allow people to hike through. And occasionally that shit sort of changes if people are obnoxious and whatnot and the owners don't want to allow it. Like with Mount Cabot, they actually, one of the original trailheads and ways to get up there kind of got closed off entirely. There's been some issues with the Twins and stuff too lately, or there was maybe a few years ago about sort of easements, but just be respectful of people's property when you're crossing that hiking. Like don't be an idiot, don't poop on their property, do something stupid like that. Which you laugh, but like
I know.
I'm sure people are just like, whatever man, live free. And
or
it's
just,
like, well, this is my farm, like be nice. But after that brief aside to come back, yeah, you start in this sort of nice farm road. I can't remember like a whole lot about like.
I do remember there was one section that was very steep.
I think going up to Whiteface.
Like not steep, like sustained steepness. There was just one little section where you had to really like hoist yourself up.
Yeah, we went up the Blueberry Ledge Trail, which is an elective, I think, terrifying 25 trail. And really, probably for these one or two sections where it is a little bit like once you approach it, you're kind of like, how do I get up there? Like you gotta think a little bit. It's nothing crazy. But yeah, you got to like kind of look for handholds and kind of see how you're going to get up. It's just sort of this like straight up ledge, maybe 15 or 20 feet high, maybe a little shorter than that. But that's probably the steep section you're thinking of.
Weren't there people with their dog?
Yeah, there were people with a dog and they turned around.
Oh, I couldn't remember if they got the dog over it or not.
I believe they turned around. That's something. This is one that if you're hiking with a really small dog or a dog that you don't think can like scramble and kind of get up stuff, be prepared to push your dog's butt up the mountain. At least if you're going up that way. You don't have to go up that way, but Blueberry Ledge Trail is definitely like the most common way to get up Whiteface. And after Whiteface, you sort of cross over to Passaconaway, and then you back out. And kind of other than the aforementioned views, like I don't remember there being like, there was good views of like Lake Winnipesaukee and stuff, I think, from Whiteface.
Yeah, there's nice views of the lakes region. I mean, overall, like it was a nice hike. Again, I think we just had like really nice weather.
Yep.
It was like very comfortable. It was a nice drive.
The foliage was like popping too. Like
it was, the foliage was starting to come out. Yeah, because I think it would be like the very end of September. Because we got married on the following weekend, which was early October. So.
Yeah, I remember at the lookout at Passaconaway, you can kind of like, it was cool. You could actually see it like turning more like reddish as you were looking further north, which is kind of neat. And maybe like frost earlier in the morning, but just a beautiful day. Again, like I think we made pretty quick time of that too. That was another day trip too. I didn't even mention that.
It was, yeah. Yeah,
we weren't even staying up there for that one. That's probably like a 3-hour ride from us, so it's not like awful.
No, it was a little bit closer to us.
Yeah, so that was cool. So next, we're actually back into the winter again. So winter 2019, we didn't do anything in December before Christmas, before officially it turned 2019. But by this point, we kind of done a couple winter hikes. We had done Hale and Wambeck by this point, so we're kind of getting more used to winter hikes. Like, and our capacity sort of to want to finish was just increasing.
Yeah.
We would actually finish in 2019 and go on to other lists, which maybe we can talk about in a further episode because that's just another thing. We're very list-centric hikers. I've become super list-centric.
I think you more so than me, but
just gives me focus on what to look for.
I'll join you on your list.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we were up in Lincoln, and that's actually, we stayed with my parents and your parents and Hannah Meadows.
This was MLK weekend?
Yes. Yeah, it would have been January 2019.
Is this Mariah?
Yeah, it's Mariah. And Ash's reaction should be telling you everything you need to know about her experience on this hike. Yes, this was Mount Moriah. Moriah is sort of the trailhead for it, at least the way we went, is in Gorham, basically, sort of the eastern side. It's kind of one of the last 48, or the last 48, actually, before you go into Maine, before the Appalachian Trail crosses the top of it. But yeah, it's the last 4,000 footer, really, as you're like heading east towards Maine from New Hampshire. Follows sort of the end into the tail end of the Carter-Moriah range, so you got the Wildcats, the Carters, Moriah, and you actually have Shelburne Moriah, which is a really nice 52 with a view that I still have to do. But it's all part of that range. It was the winter, and actually coincidentally a blizzard was moving in, not that day, we weren't being reckless, but literally the next evening, the evening that we finished, like that day. I think we got up there the Friday, it was the Saturday we hiked, and like Saturday evening, like it was supposed to get kind of shitty out. There was actually a full-out blizzard while we were up there. I think it snowed like 3 feet or something like that, which was kind of cool to be trapped in like sort of a log cabin for that long. But it was also like it needs to stop snowing because we need to like go home tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we left that morning. It was wicked cold.
It was freezing.
Wicked cold. We went, and Hannah. So again, me, you, and Hannah went.
Colder. It was colder than when we did Wombeck.
I think that was the one when I was saying Wombeck was negative 13 degrees. I think I might have even been thinking it when we did Moriah. Yeah, it was very cold.
It was very cold.
It was definitely negative, either single digits or teens when we started. We started probably like 6 o'clock in the morning. We started pretty early. We drove from Lincoln to Gorham, which is a pretty good ride. We actually took my dad's truck because I had the Corolla at that point. And
I forgot we took the truck.
Yeah, and I wanted something that had 4-wheel drive, like in case we hit snow or something.
Smart.
So yeah, we drove over there, which is a pretty good ride. Don't think by me saying that we stayed in Lincoln we were close to it. Like we weren't close to it at all. I don't know how Moriah popped up particularly. We needed the peak.
Oh, and just a quick aside, it's not spelled Mariah like Mariah Carey. It's spelled Moriah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Just so people know.
Moriah. It's like
Moriah.
It's like the Mines of Moria in Lord of the Rings, I think. I don't know exactly how we picked Mount Moriah, but we ended up heading up there early in the morning, really cold. We just had micro spikes. We didn't bring snowshoes, which proved to be a poor decision later on in the hike. I think it was more like I think my mentality was like your sister Hannah didn't have snowshoes, so I was like, if we're gonna suffer, we're all gonna suffer. I don't think we understood like how exhausting it was plowing through. Like,
we were still relatively new to winter hiking.
Yeah, to be fair.
But I do remember I used my wisdom from when we did Wombeck with like, make sure you keep your gloves on, don't take off your gloves. And I remember like giving Hannah the whole spiel when we like parked and we were about to leave. I was like, Hannah, do not take off your gloves. Keep your gloves on. Like if you need to eat something, just eat with your gloves on. Like if you need to take a picture, I don't know.
Try to do it with your gloves on.
Yeah, try to do it with your gloves on, or don't take a picture because I'm like, it's going to be frigid up there and I don't want you to experience what I experienced with taking my gloves off. So I do remember giving her that speech of like, keep those things on.
Yeah, please keep the gloves on. On the way up to Mount Moriah, you go over Mount Surprise, which is actually kind of this nice outlook. Now, the problem with hiking on a day when it's going to get snowy is that it got snowier as the day went on. I think it started snowing just as we finished up, but it was almost kind of cloudy in the morning despite how cold it was. There was almost like this haze like hanging around the mountains. It had decent views. I don't remember there being like, I don't think you could see Mount Washington or anything. Moriah normally has good views from like sort of its little summit peak, and I think Mount Surprise usually does too, but on this day it was like meh. So we started heading up. We just all had micro spikes on, and like pretty soon on, or maybe like halfway up, I'd say, it got really snowy. Like it had clearly snowed like probably a couple inches or so the day before. So it kind of covered up like the prints of where we were going. And I wouldn't say we weren't like full out like post holing or anything, but we were just, it was like walking through sand, like beach sand I'd equate it to.
Yeah. It's not like we were breaking trail. It's not like we were the first people to break that trail out since it had snowed. But I mean, there weren't many people, I think, who had gone before us.
No, I don't think there was anybody that morning that went in front of us. I remember crossing a group on the way down, but it was rough going. And Moriah has like several fault summits, so
oh, yes.
We're all like tired and stuff. And we're just going up there, and like you keep thinking you're gonna hit the summit, and then it wasn't the summit, and then it was like freezing cold. So you get into that factor too of like the winter where you just want to keep moving because it keeps you warm. So we all pushed it. Like I think we all made really good time.
We definitely debated turning around a couple times though, didn't we?
We did, because I remember we all were just getting increasingly frustrated. Like I remember there was one hump that I got to, and I'm like, this has to be it. And like I think Hannah got there, and then like you got there, and like everybody was just like, how long do we keep going through this? Because I think even then it was starting to like flurry out a little bit, and it was still just super cold out. Winter Wonderland, like, it was really pretty and stuff,
Yeah,
but I
it
think
was very
just
pretty.
none of us were like feeling it particularly.
Yeah, I think we had a little bit too much fun the night
Yeah,
before.
that definitely was a factor.
Hannah was getting over a cold.
Yeah, we were a motley crew that day. So yeah, we finally get up to the summit of Mount Moriah, and there was some foreshadowing there with what Ash said about Hannah and the gloves, because we got to the top and Hannah took off her gloves to try to like do something.
I don't even remember what she was doing.
And was like complaining that she couldn't feel her hands. So I don't think we stood up there like that long on the summit. I remember being generally fine.
We stopped just long enough to like stuff our faces with like some granola, and just we started heading down.
Yeah, we snapped some pictures like super quick. And yeah, Hannah took off her gloves, so her hands were freezing. So I'm like, we need to like keep moving and start going.
She ended up being fine.
Yeah, she was totally fine. But she's like, I can't feel my hands. Like, well, yeah, like because it's
you.
probably like 5 degrees out, and there's like a wind chill is like -10 or something like that. That's something again, we'll have to go back to that one. That's one I have not revisited.
I like to do it on a warmer day, just to see like
we did that
how it actually is, like
good enough.
just on a normal time of year.
I mean, contrary to what I'm thinking too, like looking back from what I remember, I'm sure if it's broken out and you have snowshoes, it's probably not a bad hike at all, like compared to what we did.
I think it was a combination of how we were feeling that day, the conditions, it being freezing. Yeah.
It was just sort of a perfect storm of stuff. But we got down before any like heavy snow started falling. I remember the drive home was fine and stuff, and then got another one done. That was 33. And we enjoyed it. That one, I think that day in particular, like I think it's funny when you see like on Instagram or other places and people like make it look like it's not all sunshine and rainbows hiking all the time. Like when you're hiking the 48 and you decide to do it, like there's going to be some shitty hikes. Like there's going to be hikes where you're not feeling 100%.
Yeah.
There's going to be hikes where things don't go as planned, especially to come into what we've got to talk about with our personal journey. But yeah, don't get discouraged if like you're just not feeling it one day. Like sometime you just don't feel like hiking certain mountains or going up there. Like it's just how it is.
And if you need to turn around because you're exhausted or you just don't think you can handle it, the mountains will be there another day.
Just turn
They're not
turn
going
around.
anywhere.
You don't have to slog through beach sand snow for 2 miles and feel morally defeated by the time you like. I don't even remember being excited when we got to Mount Moriah summit. I was just like, oh, here we are. Okay, let's have some jerky and stuff and have some water, and we're gonna go back down. I remember eating like so much food that night when we got home too.
Oh yeah.
Back in like we went somewhere in Woodstock that was phenomenal. Forget which place specifically.
One of my favorite things about hiking, I know we haven't really talked about this part as much, is just the guilt-free eating you can do after a hike.
For sure.
Nothing beats it.
Excuse me. I got a yawn here. It's getting later. But yeah, for sure. Especially in the winter. Another thing I love after winter hikes when it's really cold, which is kind of, I don't know, it's like a weird thing, but I almost like how like you get like cold, and when you get into a hot shower, like you can just stand in a hot shower for like ever, because your core temperature like goes down and it takes a while for you to warm up, which can be dangerous in certain situations. But there's just a nice feeling, I think, when you're like out winter hiking, the feeling you get back when you're like back in the nice warmth of like your house or whatever.
It's definitely,
you get all cozy with like your jammies on and stuff.
Oh yeah,
and it's
you
just
feel
so
more
nice.
of a relief and like more of a I feel like after a winter hike.
For sure. All right, so what's next on our journey here?
Another terrible winter hike.
Well, for you, I thought this one was fine. You hated this one. So continuing again with our vacation sort of week and vacation weekend theme, President's Day weekend, and at this point too, which was super nice, I finally got a Subaru Outback with all-wheel drive, so I wasn't driving my 2009 Toyota Corolla on anymore. And coincidentally, we actually hit like the first snowstorm we ever hit driving up to New Hampshire that night. And for President's Day weekend. So it was like the Friday night we're driving up. It was like one of those, like it was kind of snowing by the time we hit like Waterville Valley, that area. And then we got up to Lincoln and it was snowing a little bit more. For Coney Notch, it was dumping snow. Like we were going like 15 miles an hour.
That year.
We did get a ton of snow. We got a ton of snow like, yeah, even back here that year.
2019, yeah. I remember there being a lot of snow that year.
But yeah, by the time we were staying in Gorham, I had plans to kind of be around that area, do a couple different hikes, and Mount Cabot, which is kind of one of the northernmost 4,000 footers, maybe the most north 4,000 footer, is kind of nearby. To stay in Gorham or Berlin or sort of that area, or Stark is kind of all kind of general places you'd probably stay if you were doing Cabot and you wanted to be relatively close. Yeah, so we ended up driving up that night in the snow. nice new car, got us safely there. Especially I remember going down Route 2 and it was just dumping snow, and like the hotel was like calling us asking if we were like okay and stuff, because it was just kind of a crappy weather night. Checked into our hotel. I think we basically went to sleep, like had a snack, went to sleep, woke up pretty early, and it was supposed to be a beautiful bluebird day, like classic. Have you heard this before so far on our episodes? But yeah, so supposed to be bluebird day. Cold, but not like insanely cold. It was probably like 20 degrees.
It was cold, but it wasn't like, it doesn't stick out as like, oh, it was frigidly cold.
Yeah, that wasn't like the defining factor of this particular winter hike. Yeah, we head out and stuff, and I remember like right when we got around Cabot too, like it was actually like snowing, and we're like, oh, this is kind of stinky. Like maybe it'll stinky. That was such a weird adjective to use. That this is stinky, but not the most desirable weather. And it almost was like this snow cloud, and like literally all day, like even when we left, it's like this snow cloud just hung around like where Cabot was and sort of the range back there, which I think is the Pilot Pliny range. But yeah, snow cloud just hung up there all day, and it was just snowing pretty much. So we got up there, and like I think I took like 2 or 3 steps on the trail, being optimistic we wouldn't need snowshoes, and yeah, we needed snowshoes. Like I sunk like a foot in. So to our knowledge, which we'd find out later, there was only 3 people that were in front of us. So people like were breaking out the trail
pretty much right in front of us.
And I think his name's actually Adam. I'm not trying to sound like a creeper, but I know his trail name is the Teal Goat, and he's been all over his social media pages.
This was our first encounter with him. Yeah,
we'd crossed him a few times.
Yeah,
we haven't. I don't formally know him at all.
Yeah, he doesn't know us. We've just encountered him a few times.
But yeah, we've noticed just social media, and I think if you've been on some of the pages for a while, you'd know who he was. But I think he was out with some people actually planning to do like that and then do Mariah. But I think Cabot actually kicked their butts enough that day that they decided not to do Mariah in the same day,
because they
broke it out.
They broke it. Yeah.
Yeah. It was totally broken out by them and subsequently by us. It wasn't. And when I say broken out, that's like 3 people going through like a foot or so of snow. Like it wasn't like a paved trail or packed by any means.
And that makes a significant difference when you're hiking, whether it's a packed out trail or it's a trail that needs to be broken out.
Yeah. So kudos to them for getting in front of us, because there's no way we probably would have made it up that day. Or it would have taken us literally all day, and we would have got back in the dark, and Ash would have been very angry, probably.
I don't know if I probably would have been like, this isn't happening today.
Yeah. Yeah, so we did get up there. I remember Ash was like not enjoying the hike at all. Once we got to, I think it's called Bunnell Rock, but there's some rock that has a lookout on, and we got up there and like you couldn't see anything. It was just snowing, and pretty much like snowing pretty profusely. Not like enough where it was like a whiteout or something, but it was just like dumping snow. And it's funny, like you could tell it was like white around us. Like you could tell there was a sun somewhere up there, but you just could not see really anything. Really cold. There's a cabin on top of Cabot that I swear to God was colder than it was outside when we were inside the cabin. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't even know what the point of that was. Like, I guess to not have snow like actively falling on you, but it didn't like it didn't give you any like reprieve from like the cold.
And one thing to note about Cabot too, and I read this before, and it's not a big deal if you haven't, but I believe where the trail sign is, or the trailhead sign, the mountaintop sign that says Mount Cabot up there is not actually where the summit is. It's actually a little bit past it. So I made sure that we went past it and got to the actual high point when we did it. But just something to note if you are going up to Cabot. Maybe it got you. It doesn't matter. I don't think anybody's going to like deny your application if you're like, I don't know if I got to the summit or not. If you made it like past the cabin to where the sign is, like you're very close to like where everything is. But yeah, on the way back down, we're like, oh, we'll stop and eat in the cabin for a little bit. I think you can camp up there. It's just first come, first use. It's kind of a creepy cabin. It smells weird. I think it was built by like the Boy Scouts in the 60s or the 70s, and it's still being maintained up there. But yeah, I swear to God, it was colder in the cabin than it was outside. I don't know. It was just soul-suckingly cold. I think that's the only time
all day that I was like really cold. Like,
we were probably wet and sweaty at that point.
Other than that, I feel like I wasn't like freezing.
So we did chill in there for like probably 20 minutes, but we both agreed that I think it was better outside, like even in the cabin with the little door closed and stuff. And I think there might have been other people coming in, so we're like, you guys can sit here. But we just kind of ate and had some food. No views. Cabot, I think, has pokes of views here and there. The summit again is completely wooded, and a lot of people do it as like this sort of big loop with like the bulge and the horn, which the horn is a 52 with a view, but you can actually do this sort of like big loop if you want. We didn't that day because we got to Cabot and that was enough, and there was also no discernible trail after where Cabot was. Like you could just see trees, but I shouldn't say it wasn't a discernible trail, but it was definitely not broken out. Like it was just the footprints just ended at the Cabot summit. We weren't going to do it that day. But yeah, we had our fun. I don't even think we butt slid or anything. Like we just kind of
I don't
got
even
down.
think I knew what butt sliding was yet.
Which sounds weird because it's like a pretty obvious thing to do. But yeah, we got back down. I remember later that weekend too, we did get up Mount Willard in the snow that's the second time I had been on Mount Willard, but we snowshoed up to Mount Willard, which was like a pretty good time.
Yeah, the weather was a lot nicer that day.
Yeah, it was a lot nicer the second day, which seems to happen to us in the winter a lot. I don't know why. The day that isn't supposed to be nice is the nice day.
Yeah,
but yeah,
the weather changes fast up there.
That was Cabot for number 34. And let's see what's next here. This is actually backwards. I'm looking at our list.
Oh, we got an error?
Yeah, there's an error here. I just know because of how they did them. But the next one I would do, I should say this is the only one I did without you as well, is actually Mount Washington. So Memorial Day 2019, that's when you were at Kelly's bachelorette party.
Yes.
So you didn't join. We went up. We got a place in Jefferson.
Why don't we just talk about the one we did together?
Because I'm just noting that I went and did it first.
Okay.
I know you're all like, it happened. It's still a hike, and it was part of my 48 journey. We can talk about your hike in a second.
Okay.
But yes, this is the only hike me and Ash would separate on doing the 48. It was Memorial Day 2019. There was a lot of snow lingering late into the season that year. So originally I actually wanted to do Mount Monroe and not do Mount Washington because you wanted me to save Mount Washington to do with you for the first time. But you were kind, and we ended up doing Mount Washington just because Jewel Trail going up there, I saw a trail report saying that it was mostly snow-free. A lot of like Ammonoosuc Ravine going up Monroe still had a bunch of snow, and I just was like, we're not going to deal with that. And we had me, Mike, Wilkie, your dad, Hannah, and my dad. So we all went up. We did
Nate, right?
And Nate, yes, and Nate. Oops, friend of the podcast, Nate. We had a beautiful day. That Memorial Day weekend, we hiked the Saturday, and we did Mount Washington. Ash allowed me to do it without her as long as the next hike we did included Mount Washington, which is what we ended up doing. And yeah, I'll detail more like when we actually like routes and what Washington's like when we talk about it together. But we got up there. It was a beautiful day, nice and clear. Your dad got a nice coffee at the top of Mount Washington because it's Mount Washington. And we made our way back
it's like
down.
Its own town.
I've yet to do Mount Washington from the eastern side. We actually did it from Jewel Trail basically to Gulf side and then up to the summit. I always forget the name of the trail that actually goes up to the summit. It might be like Trinity Connector or something like that you actually take up there. But we got up there. It was a good time. So next, kind of forward to June, Ash is dying to do Mount Washington because I did Mount Washington. We had good views. Not as an interesting day when I did it in Memorial Day weekend as when I did it with you. So it was early June, I believe. The forecast.
It was like the following week, wasn't it? Or maybe a week or two
that would
after?
Be that would be June. So yeah, it was pretty close. Our buddy Mike was going up to do the bonds out and back. So we were kind of looking across at each other that day, so to speak. We got a little bit later start than him because we didn't have a hike like that. But I decided sort of so I could get a new one, I guess, sort of selfishly. Not that Ash needed it too. And we could do Mount Washington again. We opted to do a loop up Ammonoosuc Ravine over to Mount Monroe. Then back down, cross over Lakes of the Clouds, head up Mount Washington, and actually come back down Gulf side to Jewel Trail, sort of the portion of the hike that I had done a couple weeks earlier. The weather didn't look fantastic that day. It didn't look like, I don't think, dangerous. There was a chance of thunderstorms later, which would come to fruition. It wasn't thunderstorms, but there was sleet and hail and stuff, which was kind of not super fun. But we didn't kind of think it was dangerous or anything. Kind of one nice thing with this too is because you have Lakes of the Clouds hut on top of Ammonoosuc Ravine Trail. When you break out, you kind of can buy your time there. Like I think we chilled for quite a bit once we got to Lakes of the Clouds hut just to see what the weather was going to do.
I mean, Lakes of the Clouds hut is awesome. It's a huge hut, and I mean it was in full operation at that point too. So yeah, I think we actually sat inside. We had something to eat. We had some water. I remember I forgot my hat.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So I forgot a hat, which you definitely did need a hat that day, at least when you were at the top. So I ended up buying a little like green AMC hat. And to this day, it's like my favorite hat to hike in. Mm-hmm. So I remember buying the hat there. But yeah, we hung out there for a little bit before we headed up to Monroe. Yeah, and
Ammonoosuc Ravine Trail is like really just short and steep as you're getting up there. I've done it in the winter and done it again since, so have a pretty good feel for it. But it kind of starts out really flat, and you go by, I think it's the gem pool. There's this really like pretty waterfall kind of open area, and after that, it just like goes like it just feels like it goes straight up. And you kind of cross between different cascades, kind of going up, and eventually you pop out at Lakes of the Clouds side. And why it's nice where Lakes of the Clouds is like Monroe is like a hop, skip, and a jump. Like it's like right up from like the hut. Like maybe, I don't even think it's a mile really to pop up there. Monroe's almost this little rock pile that's sort of just sitting on the ridgeline. It's like a bump between sort of Franklin and like Mount Washington. It's kind of just chilling there, and then you get the Lakes of the Clouds, which are just beautiful in between that peak and Mount Washington. So yeah, we got up to Lakes of the Clouds. It didn't look like fantastic. Like the weather was kind of like, it was kind of like spit and rain. You could kind of see some views and stuff. It's not like it was fogged out, but it was also very windy and cold, which is Tash's point about buying a hat, because it was maybe, I bet around Lakes of the Clouds, it was probably like in the 40s. It was probably in the 30s when we were on Mount Washington later that day. I remember throwing sweatpants on and stuff. But yeah, anything in particular you remember?
Well, I remember when we were, was it when we were coming back down from Monroe, or
it was when we were going up?
It was
Monroe.
when we were going up. I do remember this was my first experience hiking with hail.
Pretty good size hail.
Yeah, and I just remember like freezing, like literally like just stopping and like being like, oh my God, what do I do? It's hailing. Rather than trying to like move away from the hail. I remember we kind of like ducked behind this like rock.
To set the scene, you could kind of see this storm front moving in from like probably the west, and it kind of kept getting darker and darker. Like we were almost like above it where it was kind of approaching us, like where the clouds were. And you could see it getting closer and closer to us as we're heading up Mount Monroe. And eventually, like, it just started pelting, like, horizontal, like, hail, basically, across the ridgeline. Like, it just was blasting the entire ridgeline.
It like, physically hurt.
Yeah, it actually did, like, sting. Not like you were gonna get a mark from it, but it was like
hurt,
someone,
though.
yeah, like someone throwing little ice pellets at you. Kind of what it felt like, because that's literally what was happening. So, yeah, we ended up hiding behind a cairn near the summit. I think we got up to the summit, and maybe it was just coming back down the summit or just before the summit of Mount Monroe. And we actually crossed two guys doing a Prezi Traverse that day, which they looked like they were pretty much done with the weather.
Well, they had gotten through the worst of it,
I guess
too.
Early in the morning, I think it was fine. It was like totally blue skies and stuff, and then the weather just kind of went downhill as the day went on. Though it didn't end up really too bad, I guess, for us. But we got up there. We had some views. We didn't have like fantastic views from Mount Monroe, and the fact that we
didn't spend a whole lot of time.
The fact that they were getting pelted with hail, like it wasn't super enjoyable. Probably goes without saying. So after we kind of sheltered with those guys a little bit, we ended up at the summit and kind of just made our way back down. At this point, I'm kind of looking at like, I kind of was thinking, I'm like, it seems like, well, the weather kind of is over for today. Like, again, and to be fair, it really didn't get much worse than that all day. We did get hail and rain a little bit, and like maybe some like sleet sort of as we were on Mount Washington, but other than the wind, like it really didn't end up being too bad. It was just cold. Like I remember it being very cold. Yeah, it was colder than the couple weeks before I was up there. You wouldn't know it was
the beginning of June.
Yeah, for sure. Anything notable about climbing up Mount Washington that you remember from that direction? I'd done it from both directions.
I remember it was like a pretty good climb up to the summit. I remember when we got to the summit, there was no views. I think
you couldn't see anything.
I think we like went to the sign real quick. I don't think we got a picture at the sign.
Also, almost spooky is what I remember. We were like the only people up there.
Yeah, there was like nobody up there.
Other than like the workers that are up there all the time. There was no hikers up there.
I don't think the train was running that day. The railroad.
I don't know. Maybe the cog wasn't running.
I don't think it was running that day. But I do remember like we went into like the building that's at the top and kind of poked around there a little bit.
Yep.
Which it's like its own town up there. It has like food, like a food court. It has like its own post office.
People have mixed feelings on the
it's interesting.
The structures up there. There's always been structures up there too. That's my thing, is if you read history, like there's always been hotels and stuff up there, and they really do help out with a lot of the search and rescues and things like that.
Yeah. So. Oh yeah. No, it was definitely a cool experience being up there, you know, being like it's the highest point in the Northeast. So it was definitely cool being up there. I wouldn't say it was like, it definitely wasn't like, oh, this is amazing. Like, but it was definitely cool being up at the top of Washington, seeing what it was like up there. We didn't really have any views. So I would definitely like to go back up there again on a day that there's better views. I think it would be really cool to do Washington on like a nice winter day. I mean, we'll see if that ever happens, but
it's going to happen.
I mean, it's Washington. It was cool, but nothing really like stuck out to me as far as like hiking up there. I mean, it was a pretty good climb up from like Lakes of the Clouds to Washington. It wasn't super close.
Yeah, it's a couple miles, and yeah, it's just kind of steep, scrambly terrain. Nothing too wild, but it's definitely not easy terrain. And I think the thing I remember most in particular was just the stark contrast compared to when I was up there on Memorial Day weekend, because it was like a freaking zoo up there. Like, we didn't have to wait for a picture at the summit sign together or anything. Like, we were the only people up there.
I don't think we even took a picture at the summit sign.
Yeah,
I think you were like, oh, do you want to take a picture? And I was like,
I don't think you cared. I think you were like, I think you were over it by that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to your point, there were no views, but I remember shortly after descending, like even by the time we got to where you cross the cog heading down towards like Jewel Trail, like we had views, like you could see like Jefferson, Adams, and Madison and stuff. So it ended up being kind of a nice day, but like I think we actually could see like the sunset a little bit. Like not that it was sunset, but you could see like the sun again as we were coming down. The weather kind of blew through.
I do remember when we came down, we were on like part of like where the cog runs. That was cool. That was cool standing on like the cog tracks.
Yeah, you cross over the tracks on, I believe it's Gulfside Trail. If you head up from like the northern sort of western side of Mount Washington, you end up crossing over the Cog Railroad and see little pieces of like coal everywhere and stuff from the coal trains.
Yeah, that was cool. Coming down was cool.
Yeah, and we had good views and stuff. And I remember it kind of just being a nice day. It's a pretty long day to do that loop.
It was a long day. Yeah, it was a long but like very fun day. I definitely enjoyed it. And did we stay over? I can't even remember.
We did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say that would have been a long day trip.
Yeah, we stayed at Carlson's Lodge. Shout out to Carlson's Lodge.
That's right. Because Mark, oh my God. Mike also stayed at Carlson's Lodge.
Yeah, he was a lot closer to his trailhead to do the bonds than we did. And he like finished so he got caught out in those thunderstorms on the bonds like earlier in the day because he was further west. And like I remember him saying that he could see the storms heading towards the presidentials. Like, I wonder if Ashley and Nick are up there right now getting it. I have some pretty wild shots of some clouds coming over with hail and stuff. Again, there was like no thunder and lightning or anything, but just some wild weather up there. Something to be very mindful of if you're heading up to Washington, even in June.
Yeah, Washington, I mean, it snows like every month of the year up there, or it has the potential to. So you definitely need to be very mindful of the weather if you're planning to hike Washington. Yeah,
and I should say, I think I mentioned I had sweatpants to pull over, but they were actually like gym shorts. They were synthetic shorts. It's not like I was wearing cotton heavy sweatpants that I used to carry.
On from the cotton.
Yeah,
I
used to carry. I mean, now I have leggings, but I just carried those as sort of like just to like a windbreaker basic thing, just to keep on and keep myself warm when it was a little bit colder. I could just pull over my shorts. So wasn't wearing cotton sweatpants. For anybody comes down on me after preaching about what to wear when you hike. Just wanted to clarify on that one fine point. So let's see. I got to look at our list here because we swapped. So that would mean Monroe and Washington were 35 and 36. And I remember, again, we went up. It was literally the next weekend. And Hannah joined us and Mike joined us again. And we were like, we're just really going for it in this 2019 year.
I think we had kind of set a goal for almost like...
Yeah, we wanted to
by
finish.
the end of the year, yeah.
We wanted to finish. So we were going at this point. Ash has this neat little bar graph that kind of, I'll have to do a picture of it online. But basically in like 2018, for example, we did 10 peaks. And in 2019, we did 16 peaks. And a lot of these I was doing again with Mike. Some of them, like I had done, he got us up Hale again the next day after we did Washington and Monroe. We did Hale in like, I don't know, like a really quick time. We just got up there and like went back. So yeah, he got us up Hale again. I had done like Tom Field Willie with him again by this point. So we were just hiking a lot more than probably what the numbers would make you think just by how far along we were. Franconia Ridge we had done twice again by this point. Yeah. I had done it twice. I had done it 3 times. You've done it twice. Yeah, you did it with Josh and Mel.
Yes.
That's what I said.
That was in 2017 though.
Yeah. So again, like we were just hiking a bunch. Like I just felt like I'd mention that. Even besides these numbers, these were just sort of newer peaks that we were doing because we were just getting pulled away by like other people to do other things in other hikes. So yeah, that would make Monroe and Washington 35 and 36. And this ended up being another day trip. Literally, like I started to talk about the next weekend. And I did mention there was a lot of snow lingering still in areas this year. I don't think we saw a lot, particularly in Ammonoosuc Ravine. I know we did that year. Not a lot on Jewel and Washington, but there was a lot of snow between an area of these peaks, which I think was kind of unexpected. But we went out to do the Tri-Pyramids day trip. Probably like 3.5 hour ride from home. That was a little bit more of a journey.
I have like no recollection of this hike. Like I know I did it obviously, but I can't tell you one thing from this hike. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, chime in if you can. So
maybe things will come to me.
Going to be like on a soliloquy about this one. So the Tri-Pyramids are in sort of again, like between the Kank and sort of the Waterville Valley area. We did it from the Kank.
Oh, isn't this the one that has the tri-slide?
Yeah. It's known because it's got 2 slides. I think they're both terrifying 25s. We didn't do it this day because it was wet and there was still snow melt like literally around, and we had known about it in trail reports. But a lot of people basically go up to North Tri-Pyramid and then they go up the North Tri-Slide, which is like a very open exposed slide that's on my bucket list. Just haven't gotten out to do it yet. Definitely not something you want to do if it's wet. It's got a pretty notorious reputation. But North and Middle Tri-Pyramid, are the two peaks on this mountain that count. The mountain's actually called like Tri-Pyramid, and there's 3 peaks on it. There's south, middle, and north. North and middle are the two 4,000 footers. Both of them are wooded. I remember we went up Pine Bend Brook, I believe, and I think the only thing notably I remember is that it was pretty flat. We almost lost the trail crossing a river several times, and then it just goes like straight the hell up the mountain. Like it just goes like really up. Like there's an area that I think does over 1,000 feet in like 0.6 or 0.7. Other than that, I don't remember it being that difficult.
I remember we kind of went out to where, this is like one thing that's coming to me. I remember we went out to one area where like the slide is.
Yes.
And we like took some pictures.
Yeah, we walked to...
That's really all I remember.
We walked down after going to North and Middle. Like North has some outlooks. I think you could see like maybe Mount Washington a little bit, and then Middle had a little bit. I don't think we had the best views that day, if I recall correctly.
I think it was cloudy. It wasn't like raining or anything like that, but I think it was just kind of like a cloudy, overcast day.
Just cloudy and overcast. And like I was mentioning about the snow before, so yeah, like going up to North Tri-Pyramid, like probably within half a mile of the summit, there was like a lot of snow, like probably a foot or two of snow, like enough to make it was more of a pain in the butt going down, really, but I remember it made it kind of slow going. We crossed just this area of just rotting snow, and like it wasn't like it interspersed with rocks, like it was literally just like snow. Like you could see footprints of people that had gone before you. It wasn't on bare ground yet. It was just kind of snowy and icy and kind of gross, especially when you're like hot and sweaty and like, and I don't know. It was just a late snow year that year. So we hit some snow in between, nothing crazy. Like we didn't need spikes. Just, that was again, another one, like we were just getting it done kind of deal. We did go down to the top of the North Tri slide, and I think we went a little bit down it before it gets really steep, but just to get that like open lookout, that's really cool. So we kind of added ourselves some elevation gain there, because I remember it being like one of those, like, it didn't seem like it was this steep going down this, and then we were climbing back up, and we're like,
that's like the only detail I can really remember.
Yeah, like we went down a couple hundred feet, like easily. We went back out, and then we got chased, I think, by like black flies pretty much back to the car later on.
There were a lot of black flies. I remember
that. We got like annihilated by black flies. We like basically like slow jogged, like sped hike like back to our car once it kind of got to flat again. And I remember like just trying to rush in the car and like close, like I remember just letting out so many flies on the way home from like being at the trailhead and then closing my car with the AC on. So yeah, I don't know what day trip that marked by that point, but that was another pretty long day for sure. And it was kind of cool. We were like on a run by that point. We had done like, I think 3 out of 4 weeks we had been up to New Hampshire hiking from the holiday weekend. So we were on a roll. And let's see, where did we stay? Oh, this is when we stayed. We didn't actually stay at Newfound Lake this summer. In 2019, we switched it up. We stayed in Franconia at this beautiful like log cabin that literally was like on the cover of like a log cabin living magazine, or
we
had
were
like
joking
a feature.
It was like Tom Brady's log cabin.
Yeah, and as Ashley phrased it, it was like New Hampshire threw up in the log cabin. There was like a surplus of New Hampshire decorations.
Every possible New Hampshire decoration you could think of.
Skis.
It was almost too much.
Snowshoes.
The place was beautiful.
It was absolutely gorgeous. And where it was in Franconia overlooked like the Kinsmans, the Cannonballs, and like couldn't really see Franconia Ridge, but the Kinsmans, Cannonballs, and like Cannon.
It was beautiful. It was in a great area.
That western side of Franconia Notch. Yeah, it was just beautiful. Interesting road to get up there too. But anyways, that's the house that we're at. Just noting it because these things like just sort of stick in your brain of where you were. And on the way up, that's how much me and you were like, and it became commonplace for us to just start hiking places when we drive up like on vacation, because that was like let's start our vacation by doing a big hike. But this year we decided to do South Carter, Middle Carter on the way up on our drive up there. So we did like a huge loop around New Hampshire and the Whites that day, because we drove up like 16, then we went like all the way across to like 2, then like back over eventually to 3 and 302 and like Franconia, and just like big loop around. But that was just me and you that day. We went up there and did South Carter, Middle Carter. Anything notable you remember about the Carters? That we didn't do North Carter. South and Middle, I should say, count. There is a North Carter, and also part of the Carter-Mariah Range. The Middle and South count. I think
so. I do remember it was like a very nice day. It was sunny. I think it was like, I mean, it was hot, but it wasn't like, I don't know, nothing really like super sticks out to me. I just remember being very excited to be on vacation. And
we were just on endorphins.
The previous summer, I didn't have a full week off in the summer, so I was really excited to have like a full week off. So I think we were just really excited. It was a great day. We were happy to be out. We were starting to get closer and closer to our goal of finishing. So actually, wasn't this 39 and 40?
Yes, it was.
So I remember that being really exciting.
Yeah, the fact that we're hitting 40.
We hit 40,
we're
yeah.
Home stretch.
So I don't think it was necessarily any big details from the hike itself. I think just the overall like vibe and just being excited that day. It was a good day.
Yeah, so the AT crosses over sort of the whole Carter range. I mentioned that when we were talking about Mount Moriah a little bit, but it kind of comes up it crosses like 16 kind of from the presidentials, and then goes sort of across this whole stretch like the Wildcats, Carter Dome, the Carters, and eventually makes its way over to like Moriah to kind of give you a span of that like side of the mountains and that side of the Whites where the 4,000 footers are. So this one was like, I don't remember, we saved it for later just because I don't think anybody really talks about South and Middle Carter, to be completely honest with you. We did it up 19 Mile Brook Trail to like, I don't know if it's Carter Ledge Trail or something like that. I don't remember the name of the trail that goes to Middle Carter and South Carter. Basically, you go up 19 Mile Brook, you like hang a left at one point and you just go up. South Carter literally had a little pile of cairns. Again, I know people dismantle these things regularly. On top of South Carter. Kept going past a little down and up. I remember there being probably the nicest view of the whole hike was there was an open area between like South and Middle Carter as you're approaching Middle Carter.
I remember which one had the views.
It was approaching Middle Carter, I think.
Okay, because I do remember there being some like pretty nice views at points in the hike.
Yeah, I remember you could still see, and again, the theme with the late snow year, like we're into the 3rd week of July, or maybe even 4th week of July at this point, and there was still like snow on top of the side of Jefferson and Tuckerman Ravine. Like there was still like a little ring of snow hanging out.
Oh yeah, I think we actually have a picture of me looking
somewhere
out, and you can like see the snow.
Yeah, somewhere you can still see it hanging out there. So we got those done. Nothing. Again, I'm just really trying to think. I don't think there was anything super notable. We went up 19 Mile Brook Trail to get up there. It follows sort of just a 19 mile brook. If I was going to say it follows a river, it follows 19 Mile Brook, and nothing really that crazy. In that area, there's a lot of different trails and stuff. There's probably a couple different options to get up there depending whether you come from the west or the east or whatever. I think it's the Wild River Wilderness that goes the east over there. But yeah, nothing crazy. We saved those for later because we kind of just didn't really hear anything about them. I just was like, this was like two where I really felt like we just had to do them. Like I wasn't like, let's go out and do these.
Yeah, I think we were just generally excited because we knew this was going to be like, we're hitting 40 finally. It was a nice day. We're on vacation.
Yeah.
But nothing else notable other
than
that.
So Carter Dome has pretty good views. Or I should say it doesn't have pretty good views, but on the way to Carter Dome, you can go up Mount Height, which is in that same area, which has really good views. It's not a 4,000 footer, but it has really good views, which we ended up doing later that week. But we kind of banged those out, and we just stacked ourselves up this weekend. So I think we got there, and then
we did a lot of hikes this week.
Yeah, we did a lot of hikes this week. So we got to our house. We like settled in for the night. I think we were in bed pretty early, and our plans were to actually meet Mike at basically the Isolation Trailhead, or I should say it's really the Glen Ellis Falls parking area. The western side, you can catch Glen Boulder Trail, which is one way sort of to start to get to Isolation. But we met up in the morning with him. He drove up there from home, and we met and we're set out to do Isolation together because we all three of us, I should say, me, Ash, and Mike all needed Isolation. And the thing about Isolation is it's very isolated, which sounds stupid, but name. It's super isolated. So do you want to talk about Isolation a little bit?
Yeah. So I think the best way to describe it, I think Mike had said this originally, but it's basically like a tale of two hikes. Like just the way the hike. So like you start off the hike. I do remember going up and we hit the, what's the name of those giant boulders?
Glen Boulder. It's Glen Boulder Trail. And I should mention too, like, again, like you can do Isolation from different ways, but pretty much people either do it from Glen Boulder, like out and back, which is how we did it. Or you can do sort of a traverse from like Glen Boulder down, I think, Rocky Branch. Or some people just do Rocky Branch from the south, like out and back. But Glen Boulder Trail we picked purely because we heard it had amazing views. Yeah.
And I mean, this was Isolation. It was definitely a challenging hike, but I think overall it was just a very unique, cool hike. And I think the weather that day was really cool too. It was very kind of like foggy and like mysterious. Mm-hmm. And like, I just remember, but at the same time, we still had really nice views. So I remember going up, we hit Glen Boulder, which is essentially this giant boulder that's like, almost looks like it's about to like fall off the edge of a cliff. but it's just there because it's not going anywhere clearly. But
do you remember when we ended up on a ski trail before that too for a little bit?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Was funny.
Yeah.
That just made me think of that story. Not to cut you off, but we were on the way up, and
that was very early on in the hike.
Yeah, this was super early on in the hike. But one thing in that area going up Glen Boulder Trail, which I'm sure we're not the only idiots who have made this mistake.
No,
especially
I'm sure.
if you're like. Not that we're more experienced hikers, but like now I know like ski blazes look different. But like literally we kind of were going up Glen Boulder Trail and we passed this group. This is like another embarrassing part of the story is like we passed this group of like 10 or 12 probably like older hikers like senior age. And we're like, oh yeah, we're like, they let us go around. They're like, oh yeah, you guys are like clearly younger and whatnot. And we keep going up and like eventually I think at one point like one of us was like, this almost feels like a ski trail. Like this is weird.
It was very flat.
Yeah.
It didn't have like a rocky terrain. Like typically a hike would.
We crossed, and I think it hit us more when we crossed like a pretty treacherous looking river crossing. Like it was almost like the edge of like a ledge, sort of cliffish looking thing. And finally, like we kind of pull out. I think Mike might have had all trails by this point, or we pull out a map and like we realize that there's a ski trail like adjacent to Glen Boulder Trail for part of it. So yeah, we ended up on a ski trail, but like
fortunately we hadn't gone too far. It didn't take us long to get back on track. And I remember like we came behind that group again.
Yeah, again.
And they were like,
so like, why do you need to pass us again? Like, what the hell happened? So we're like, yeah, we took the wrong trail, kind of. So maybe we should slow down a little bit.
It happens.
Yeah.
It was very early on in the hike, too.
Thankfully. Already a long day, though. Like, we didn't need to add more onto it.
Yeah, but I remember Glen Boulder was really cool, like, seeing it. I think I have a picture of me, like, looking like I'm trying to push it off the edge of the cliff, which is cool. But I remember, like, going up to the boot spur.
Yeah, the trail. So Glen Boulder, you go up to Glen Boulder, which is sort of this boulder that looks like it's literally going to fall into like Pinkham Notch. It's just like perched on the side, and then you go over, I think it's Slide Peak, and eventually if you keep going up it hits, I forget if it's Mount Isolation Trail or it's the Boot Spur Trail. I think it's Mount Isolation Trail you actually take to Isolation. But if you keep going up it, yeah, it's like you go like within 500 or 600 vertical feet of the top of the Boot Spur. So it's like, yeah, like, so you're climbing like above literally like 5,000 feet or close to it just to descend to a peak that's barely over 4,000 feet.
Yeah. So that's why it's kind of like the tale of two hikes, because it's almost like part one of the hike is going up to like just below the boot spur. And then the second part of the hike is going down to get to Isolation. So it's almost like you go up all this way just to go down and actually get to the summit of the hike. Typically when you are at the summit, you're at the highest point, but it wasn't the highest point that we had hiked during that day.
Yeah, so like Ash was saying too, it started out with like kind of being cloudy and like mysterious, but eventually like it opened up pretty good. I think Washington might have been in the clouds until like we actually got it to Isolation.
Yeah, when we were at Isolation, we could see a good amount.
But we got up pretty close to like the Boot Spur. You start heading back down, you cross I think into the Dry River Wilderness, and eventually again wilderness area, like you go to Isolation, like there's not really again like heavily marked trail and stuff. It's got that wilderness feel not to use the word wilderness again, but just a little bit different than trails that aren't in wilderness areas. And I remember it being very, 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 very wet.
Yes.
In particular, like areas of bog bridges that look like they were built in like the 80s that like nobody had kind of done anything to since. And yeah, you go all the way down back into the woods below tree line again and slog across all the way to Isolation, which I forget how long. It's over 10 miles, I know, to do
it's a lengthy hike
from Glen Boulder. Yeah, we got up to Isolation. Isolation has really pretty views. It's actually really similar to like if you've done Resolution or like Parker, like some of those peaks like in the area. Like it's got sort of that same feel and look towards Mount Washington, except you're just really closer. Like you feel like you're just like on a little like couch or something looking at Mount Washington, which I think is pretty cool. And I remember not particularly cold or anything or crazy, but just a long day. I remember like once you're there on Isolation too, and you can literally see where you came from. It hits you very quickly how you have to go up again. It's like a 5,000 foot day, I think, to do on and back.
Oh yeah. Because it's basically like you go up, then you go down, then you go back up again, then you go down again. And again, you
don't have to do that. A lot of people car spark traverse and like go down Rocky Branch and kind of end, so you don't have to go back up again. The one nice thing about it is if you go out and back via Glen Boulder, you get those great views again to sort of end your day, which I think was really nice, despite how much it sucked going back up from Isolation back up to the trail to meet Glen Boulder again. But that was cool. I just remember we saw human poop on the trail, which was pretty disgusting at one point.
We did. That was the hike. That was early on in the hike,
I felt the need to share that with everybody. It was like someone couldn't make it to the bathroom, I guess. I don't know what the deal was with that, but that was the first time we encountered that, which was disgusting. Anyways, and the other thing too is I learned that my mom just tends to be like looking out for us and stuff, and like I think we got down like an hour at least later than I thought that we made contact with her, so she was kind of freaking out a little bit. She wasn't super happy. We got down a little bit later than we thought we would. A lot of the time probably because we were just taking our time.
We also spent a bit of time at the summit because we had our summit beers. We had just
did we have summit beers in that
we
one?
Did, yeah. Okay. We did. I mean, we had gone on like a journey to get there, so we were
#isolated.
Yes. So we took our time at the summit and just kind of chilled. I think we were trying to like prolong the inevitable of having to go back up again, but
yeah, unfortunately we had to go back up and out, and we made it down again. And Glen Boulder's like, I remember going down was like slow because there's a couple areas of Glen Boulder Trail that are pretty darn steep to go up. Down and climb. That's another trail in the Whites that like climbs over 1,000 feet for probably a couple miles. But it's like, then the flip side of it is like all of a sudden you pop out and you're at like Glen Boulder and you're like, cool, and then you're above tree line for like the next mile or two. So yeah, that was our isolation story. So this is how we kicked off our vacation that week. Saturday we did Middle and South Carter, and Sunday we drove back to basically the same area across the Whites again from Franconia, and did isolation with Mike. Mike came back with us and stayed for a few days. He did Wambeck, I think, the day in between that we didn't do anything, and then I believe it was the Tuesday of that week in July that we decided to do Mount Jefferson, which was our last remaining presidential peak at that point.
Yes.
So Mount Jefferson, many different ways to do that one. The way that we chose to do it is from Caps Ridge, which is actually the highest trailhead in the Whites. It's like a fun fact. I think it's over 3,000 feet. So it's kind of cool because it gets you really up and close to Jefferson. And Caps Ridge, while it's a terrifying 25 trail, I wouldn't say it's particularly terrifying. There's a couple places where if you don't like sheer drop-offs and heights, that you'll probably be pretty uncomfortable. I didn't find it to be anything that crazy. My dad, who isn't in love with hikes, was fine on it. It is very scrambly, like got to be comfortable with scrambling up some boulders and some sort of ledgy areas. But for like, I don't know if it's even 2,500 feet of elevation gain and like 2 to 3 miles, like you basically end up on the summit of Mount Jefferson, which is pretty cool. It's not a bad hike at all.
No, it was a fun one. The weather was beautiful that day too.
Except it rained on the way down.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. It did rain. But I mean, it was beautiful for most of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice for most of it. We got up to Jefferson. We had my dad, Mike, me, and Ash going up. Went up Caps Ridge. The summit area of Jefferson gets pretty rocky and kind of has that presidential, almost Adams-like feel of like you feel like you're getting close to it, but you can't actually see the summit. Like you keep getting over this bump and that you think is the summit, and then finally it's there. Jefferson is not it's probably my least favorite presidential summit. Like I'm going to go out there. Say that other than maybe like Webster's not a presidential name, but in the presidential range, like Webster's kind of the other lackluster one, but like, I don't know. It's just like, it feels like someone just dumped some rocks in like a spot on top of a mound, which I guess you could argue is most mountains feel like that, I guess, like especially in the presidential range, but I don't know how to describe it. It's just, it's not very like spiny. It doesn't drop off really steeply. It has great views and stuff, and it's notoriously difficult to get to in the winter because of where it's located, but it just didn't like resonate with me as hard as like Adams and Madison or even Washington, I would say. Still a great summit. We chilled up there. Ash battled giant spiders that live on rocks. I don't know what kind of... If you're listening to this and you know what species of spider those are, like reach out to us and hit us up because I'm curious.
They were unreal.
And I'm sure anybody that's been up there in the summer like knows what we're talking about, but there's these like black spiders that are like the speed of light, like how fast they move.
Like and Jumanji spiders.
They were like everywhere.
They
were like tarantulas, but they were big spiders for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I remember those being on the summit as we were chilling out, and we chilled up there for a while.
We did. Well, it didn't take us a ton of time to get up there.
No,
from what I remember,
yeah, it wasn't bad.
And we knew it was going to take us like a ton of time to get down, so we definitely spent a bit of time at the top. I think we did another summit beer.
Yep. Yeah, and I think while we were up there, the clouds sort of started moving in a little bit from the west, so we were kind of like, oh, we probably should start moving down. And unfortunately for us, it rained a little bit on the way down, and like just enough to make stuff a little bit wet, which made it a little slow going on the way down. I wouldn't want to go down that with like a ton of wet ice or something like that. Like it'd be kind of treacherous. Mike if you're listening to this, you know that you took us off trail a little bit. You made us bushwhack a little bit on the way down. So that's why I don't trust Mike navigating. Just kidding. I trust him navigating all the time. But yeah, on the way down, I think Mike was leading and I was behind him, so I can't really say much. But we ended up definitely going off trail for probably a little bit of going down Caps Ridge and kind of find our way back. But we were just looking through areas in the pine scrub, and I think we thought we saw a blaze going down, and like it wasn't a blaze. Wasn't anywhere dangerous, and we didn't get into trouble, but just kind of a fun little story.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens. We were going, and like if you've ever been bushwhacking through that scrub, like you know it just like shreds your legs and stuff up there. It's not fun. Got down Jefferson. Yeah, and just a fun day. Just chilled out. That didn't end our hikes for the week though. So like Wednesday, Thursday, I think we chilled out, and then the last day we were up there, me and you set out to do Carter Dome. So for those of you kind of keeping track, this will be the third time this week that we've driven across, basically back from Franconia over to the Pinkham Notch area. Like we just, that weekend was like, we were just knocking out that whole area of like trailheads leading from Pinkham Notch. So we're headed back over there again to do Carter Dome. Carter Dome doesn't have great views itself, unless allegedly if there's a ton of snow. And actually, I shouldn't say allegedly because I've seen it and seen pictures of it. But if there's a ton of snowpack, it has great views. It can be above the trees. But in the summer, there's like no views from Carter Dome. We can start out 19 Mile Brook Trail again. That's what we did to get up there. We chose to go over Mount Height on the way to go up Carter Dome. Mount Height has really good views, best views of that hike by far. It's not a 4,000 footer, but it has great views of the presidential range and everything else. Anything else about Carter Dome that you remember?
Honestly, I really don't remember. I don't know if it's
I feel
because
like you just zoned out on half of these hikes at the end.
I don't know. I don't know if I was just unfortunately going through the motions on some of these hikes. Like, also, I don't know if it's because like we just hiked so much that week.
Yeah, we hiked it.
So I feel like they just all blend together. I mean, I feel like...
Yeah, I remember my parents being like, you guys are going hiking again.
I feel like the standouts from that week were Jefferson and Isolation.
Yeah, I agree. Those
and
were
the Carters kind of
just
just got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah,
I'm
not in a rush to go back, and I mean, I'm gonna end up doing Carter Dome again. Like I need it for the winter, and I'm sure I'll just go up there again for seasonal or whatever. But it's not one of the ones I would rush back to. I mean, Mount Height was really cool. The other thing that day too is I remember like there were mosquitoes that were just really bad that day, which is funny because they weren't bad when we were up there on the Saturday, but by like that, I think it was either Thursday or Friday we did that. Like they were just awful.
Maybe because there was some rain in between.
Yeah, I don't know, but it was. I remember we were going back down 19 Mile Brook and like hauling ass on the way down because they were just like relentless. They were just like flying into your mouth and your eyes, and it was just not a lot of fun. Whew. So by that point, we're at number 43.
Thanks if you're still with us.
If you're still with us. This is going to be, I don't know if this is going to be longer than the first half or not.
I don't know.
My Apple Watch is like, you need to stand. You've been sitting for an hour. But yeah, so that took us up to number 43. So we're down to 5 left. 5 little peaks left.
Not so little peaks.
Yeah, not so little peaks, but not the biggest ones in the whites either. So we get back in July. I think this is August-ish. Probably August. We decide we're going to do another day trip. Or actually, this wasn't a day trip, rather. This was just an overnight trip, but we left like pretty late at night. Like I think we left our house at like 6 o'clock or something, and we hit traffic.
We did. Is this the Wildcats?
Yeah, this is the Wildcats. Yeah, for 44 and 45. So we left like pretty late at night. We stayed at a random hotel in Jackson. I think we weren't even in our room for like more than 10 hours, probably.
No, just a bed.
We got there at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night and left probably at like 6 o'clock in the morning or something. It was probably better than driving up super early. The Wildcats, I think, for us from where we live, are like the furthest 4,000 footers to get to the trailhead from, pretty much, other than like Mariah. Actually, might even be further than that just because of how you have to drive there up 16. But it's not close to us. It's like 3 hours and 45 minutes or 4 hours to get there. But yeah, we set out to do the Wildcats. The Wildcat Range is the home of the Wildcat ski area, which a lot of people probably know it from and have skied there. It's kind of across from Mount Washington, has really good views of that. There's like 5 different sub-peaks of Wildcat, A through E. Wildcat D and Wildcat A are the 2 peaks that count for 4,000 footers. I think those actually have shifted around a little bit in like history or something too. I remember reading that like in 2003, they figured out like one was higher than the other. But anyways, needed those 2. Drove up that night, slept over, just like ate, crashed. Met a really persnickety dude at Subway who was an employee that was like, I think he wanted to murder me because I asked for like mayonnaise on my sandwich and he just wasn't feeling it because it was like 9:30 at night in North Conway and he was just done with people. Anyways, I hope he's still doing well. He seemed very depressed. Anyways, yeah. set out early in the morning, and what we decided to do for this one, and like I had kind of researched different routes, and we actually decided to go down the ski trails at Wildcat to finish out the hike and kind of start out by going up with a road walk and then going up from sort of Pinkham Notch. So what we ended up doing was parking at the Wildcat ski area at the base, and then we walked down 16 to, I think it's something pond trail that connects to the Appalachian Trail, which is actually right near Glen Ellis Falls trailhead. So across from where we did isolation. And we went up to Wildcat, I believe it's Wildcat D from there, which is the top of the ski area. And man, oh man, that is a really steep section. That's the steepest section of the Appalachian Trail in its entirety. That literally is like the steepest mile. Like I think it has a mile that goes up like 1,300 feet or 1,400 feet or maybe more.
It was very steep, very scrambly.
Yeah, it ascends. Like the nice part is that all of a sudden you're sort of breaking out to ledgy views like across to Mount Washington and stuff. But it goes like up very, very aggressively up the ridgeline. It kind of goes from Pinkham Notch and then all of a sudden like just shoots straight up there towards Wildcat D. And yeah, there's like sections. It's almost like the Fish and Jimmy Trailhead where there's portions where there's just wooden blocks drilled into basically the side of boulders and ledges. There's some really little scrambly, like sort of, I don't even like crevice areas. You just kind of like shove yourself up through. People go down it. Like I don't think it'd be dangerous to go down it if it's dry. It's probably not preferred to go down it. Like a lot of
definitely
people do
easier to go up it.
A lot of people do what we did, and I don't even know if I know Vail Resorts owns the ski area now, so I don't even know if they let you get on the trails. So check that if you're planning to do that. But we actually, like I said, went up and then we went down the ski trails,
which was cool. That was cool.
Why I opted to do that was two reasons. One, we wouldn't have to descend that steep area down to Glen Ellis Falls again. And number two was that the ski trails themselves have like probably some of the best views of that entire hike.
Yeah. No, I mean, we pretty much had views pretty much the whole way down from the ski. Yeah,
literally. Yeah, so we went over to D, which is like the top. I think there's like an observatory platform, and it's the top of the ski area where like their main lifts come up. And then you go across, I think the summit of D is like technically in the woods past there. And then you go up and down a few times. I don't know how many times, maybe two, because it's like BC. And then you hit Wildcat D. Or Wildcat A rather. And Wildcat A is sort of the last peak in that range before you descend into Carter Notch, where Carter Notch Hut is, which is like the only AMC hut we've actually never been to really in the Whites. I've never been to that area. I think there's a little pond down there and it's pretty. And then from Carter Notch, it actually goes back up to Carter Dome, which we had just done. So yeah, out to the Wildcats. I remember Wildcat A has a nice view to Carter Notch, but that's kind of it. There's nothing for views along the ridgeline that I can recall like at all. Like,
again, I think the bulk of our views were when we kind of like broke through to the top of like the ski place and then coming down the slopes.
Definitely.
Like was pretty much where we saw our views.
Definitely. I remember we crossed a bunch of AT hikers too because of the time of year.
Didn't we also cross these ladies that were like from like Georgia or something?
I think they were from Virginia.
But they were like section hiking?
Yeah, they were section hiking the AT and they were doing the Whites and they were complaining about how like this section was like crazy.
Mm-hmm. They're not wrong.
No, they weren't wrong at all, for sure. I remember crossing them and kind of having a nice chat and stuff and kind of being inspired by them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we went out to Wildcat A, then you end up going back to where you kind of came up, and then we went down pretty much all the ski slopes. I forget, too, if it was like a specific line, if you take like the green. I remembered at the time the name of the ski trails, obviously, because we got down okay, but we took like probably like the equivalent of like green circles or whatever down. Like it wasn't anything like steep.
No. And it's funny.
And there's a road during part of it, I think, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember. One thing that stuck out to me too about coming down is I think I just assumed like, oh, we're going down the ski trails, so this is gonna be like a breeze. This is gonna take like 2 seconds. No. It definitely was more than I expected.
Yeah, it was definitely easier, I think, than going back down to sort of the Glen Ellis Falls area and going back down Wildcat Ridge Trail.
But I think it just I don't know.
It's not like poop.
I didn't realize that it was gonna be like.
Yeah, it was a while. It took us a bit to get down for sure. But again, easier than going down the Wildcat Ridge Trail. And again, I remember that being a long ride home. Like I was tired because it was probably I think we hit some traffic around Conway as usual.
Yeah.
And it took us like 4.5 or 5 hours to get home.
That was a long day.
Yeah, it was a long day. We had good views and stuff. I'm trying to think if there's really anything else. The Wildcats, I mean, in my head of like 4,000 footers, like they're ones like I probably would definitely go back to. Like I would do it the way we did it if I could do it again. I know people do like Wildcat Carter Mariah traverses, which is kind of a crazy thing. It's like
no, thank you.
It's like a presidential traverse, probably pretty equivalent or something like that. So that's definitely a thing That range is pretty. I think it's not as traveled as some of the other places in the Whites for sure. So that left us with 3 at this point. There was actually, I mean, we'll have to go over though one more hike before we actually get 46, because next basically it was September time frame, 2019. We're getting kind of close to that fall time span and stuff. And the other thing to mention too is we're actually looking at buying a house at this point, so we're like busy doing stuff, and we were like selling our condo.
This was a very busy time. Yes.
Yeah, we decided, like, short backstory, we got some shit from like our HOA at the condo we lived at that were complaining about our black cat. They didn't know we actually had 2 black cats, so that was kind of funny. They look alike. But yeah, so we got a letter in the mail, and like we had gotten kind of shit from them before about various things, and we decided, like, I just was done with it. Like, we're gonna look for a house. I'm done dealing with this. I don't want to have like someone looking through my windows looking at black cats and seeing what we got in our window. But anyways, yeah, so backstory, we're like kind of rushing around a lot at home, and I think we had desire to finish kind of before Columbus Day. Even that, I remember kind of thinking that in my head, at least, because I'm like, we're going to be really busy probably moving in, and like then it's going to be winter before we know it.
Yeah.
And like the peaks we had remaining, I'm like, I don't know about doing that in the winter.
It was kind of a very a hodgepodge of
we had
remaining peaks.
At this point, we had Mount Carrigan, which a lot of people picked to finish on because you can see a lot of the 48 from it. I think more than any other summit.
That was a cool one, yeah.
And we had Owl's Head, and then we had South Kinsman. Owl's Head is, which we'll go into, is there's a reason why a lot of people save that for later. And then South Kinsman, to tie it all the way back to us starting on North Kinsman, because we didn't make it to South Kinsman because of thunderstorms when we did North Kinsman.
I think we knew we wanted to end on that one just because it's like a full circle.
Yeah, we had decided we
fitting.
decided well into early 2019, late 2018,
pretty early on,
that we wanted to finish on South Kinsman,
because it would be like a big full circle moment, like, we didn't make it during our first hike, we can end on it.
Yeah,
and we'll get to see North Kinsman.
And I gotta be honest too, I mean, for how much I'd be curious the stats on, I'm sure like the AMC committees have them, but like I'd be curious how many people finish out to South Kinsman, because I bet it's not super common.
I would be curious to see the stats on like what's the top, like, in order of the 48, like what do people typically finish on?
I think Bondcliff and Carrigan are probably up there, and Owl's Head is like always in like people's like last 10, because nobody wants to do Owl's Head. But again, to highlight, we had Carrigan, Owl's Head, and South Kinsman left at this point. Those are our last 3 peaks we had to finish the 48. September rolls around. We're looking at the forecast. The forecast looked good. Again, this is like, if you're keeping track, like this has to be, I'm not keeping track, but I'm guessing it's probably the 5th or 6th time in our journey that we hit like supposed to be a really nice weather day, and it like went from nice to like kind of crappy to like straight shit in like, frankly, in like a day, or like by the time we actually started hiking. So for this, we drove up the night before, and we decided we're going to do Owl's Head because we don't want to like save Owl's Head for second to last. Do you want to like, I'm going to while Owl's Head like is typically a later peak, like the reasons for that.
So one thing about Owl's Head, so it's barely 4,000 feet. So it's not like people are putting it off because it's the super high, intimidating peak. The reason why a lot of people put it off is because to get to Owl's Head, you start doing the Lincoln Woods Trail, which is that very long trail that we took coming back down from when we did the Bonds Traverse. So to get to just like the base of Owl's Head is like what? Like 8 miles?
Yeah, I should probably check this over. It's a ways. It's somewhere in that ballpark.
So people put it off because it's a very long hike in, just to get to the base. Then once you get to the base of Owl's Head, it's pretty steep up to the top. Once you get up to the top, it's a wooded summit. So there's no views. Essentially, you only have views when you're going up the Owl's Head slide, and you have some views from there.
Pretty much.
So it's a very long hike. It's very mentally tiring because you're just kind of looking at the same thing for a while. It's steep. It gets steep. You're at the top. There's no views. So I don't know, I think that's why a lot of people tend to save it.
Not uncommon for another one to do is like an overnight, for sure. Like a lot of people do it. The other thing that's notable about Owl's Head is if you take the normal route to it, which I kind of waver from saying normal because I think everybody uses the Black Pond Bushwhack that I ever like see now on social or whatever, instead of using the normal trail. But we did it the quote unquote normal way. which has 3 crossings of like branches of the Pemigewasset River, which can prove challenging in high water, which anybody in any research you do will tell you about the hike. But yeah, so we set out to do it. We woke up in the morning. I knew it was going to rain that day. Like we both knew. We did not know it was supposed to let up and not be as bad as it was. We started pretty early just to try to avoid the weather. And like the weather went from like bad to like really bad, like pretty quickly. It wasn't significantly cold or anything, but it rained like a mofo, basically. Like it was insane.
Time.
Like it started to get bad. I think we were being optimistic, and we started to cross, and we made it to the base of the Owl's Head slide. And like when I say it was like Jurassic Park style, like the T-Rex scene in Jurassic Park, if you're from our generation, like it's raining like unbelievably hard. It was like, I swear to God, it was like Jurassic Park style rain. It was insane. Everything was wet. I was honestly concerned that my bag, my keys that were in 2 Ziploc bags, like double bagged, were literally gonna be wet, like,
and not work.
Like that's how freaking wet it was. It was ridiculous. So we got to the base of the slide, and kind of going with our own mantra, we turned back. We hadn't seen anybody really all day. I think we saw a group of 2 people early on in the hike, like 2 miles in on Lincoln Woods Trail, that we're supposed to like go out for the weekend. They're like, no, we're not gonna stay out here today. And we made it to the base of the slide, and we're like, I kind of got a bad feeling. I'm like, we started to go up it a little bit, and I'm like, this is sketchy. And I was like, this is stupid. I'm like, we're by ourselves. It's wet. We haven't been up here before. Having known what the Owl's Head slide looks like later on, I'm like, there's no way there's no logical reason, or I couldn't have come up with a logical reason for us to actually continue.
Just to give some perspective, so when we were basically at the base of the slide, we only had about a mile to go. So just think we had gone maybe 7-8 miles already.
Like and we're really close.
We were very close.
That last bit up the slide goes up like well over 1,000 feet in a mile to get to the top of Owl's Head. So it's pretty legit. And it's all herd path. Again, you're in a wilderness area. It's herd path. It's easy to follow. But there is definitely a section of it where like a choose your own adventure sort of deal, where it's like you're kind of just picking a path to try to get up the slide to the summit.
You're just trying to get there.
Again, we haven't been up there in like, again, it's 2019, like 4 years, and I know with hiking popularity, it's probably just more traveled than it was even then. But yeah, we turned back, and those rivers and streams that we crossed on the way, like out, became like waist deep, like rivers, like on the way out, to the point that like we were the last crossing we made over the Pemi. I'm not sure which branch it was, but we were like holding on to each other, like literally, like we were in waist deep water. It was really sketchy, because I remember looking at each other at one point. I'm like, we kind of got to try to go across, or we're going to be like literally stuck out here, which would have really sucked. And we started really early, so I think we got back, it was only like noon or something.
I think
or
it
maybe
was
2 o'clock, 2-3 o'clock. By the time we got back to our hotel in Lincoln, that we stayed at a hotel in Lincoln that time. We were getting to be specialists at staying in all the hotels at Lincoln, or at least the ones that were the cheapest. But yeah, like we went out, we came back. Like I've never experienced water like that. Like rushing, that taught us another lesson. The whites are always teaching us lessons, sort of. So we were learning hiking, and we continue to learn and hike. But like rivers and shit, like don't take that for granted. Like if it's gonna rain and pour, and like you read that it can be bad in a trail guide, or you hear from people, like don't put that lightly. Like I really like, and even I'll go out of my way sometimes to like mention to people if they ask about hiking, I'm like, don't do this hike if it's going to be raining and pouring, like, because that day, like, it resonates with me to this day. Like,
oh yeah.
it was scary. Like it was enough for like it to really push Ash over. Like Ash probably weighs around 130, 140 ish, and is like pretty tall. She's not like, you're not like small really, I would say. And like it was pushing you around like good, and it was pushing me around good, and like
I lost my water bottle, I remember.
Yeah, we broke a leave no trace there. Like it was it was very much like it dropped and just got ripped down, and like it was a scary day, frankly. Like I'll be honest, like
it was a sketchy experience.
It sketched us out a little bit. Like we made it back to the car, and in one piece my car keys still worked. I was super glad about that. We
were soaked to the bone.
It didn't even matter. Like what people joke about, you could pee and stuff and not notice, but like I legitimately just peed myself at one point, because I'm like, literally you can't tell, and like it was pouring so hard, like it just didn't matter. Everything was completely soaked. It was insane how hard it rained. I've yet to see rain that hard, I think, again, ever. But that was pretty wild. So we got our asses kicked by Owl's Head the first time, pretty much. We underestimated it. Like I'll never think about hiking in the rain with rushing water the same way ever again. We did make it out safe.
Yeah,
and I think
it was our first time turning around.
Ultimately, we made a good decision turning around,
100%,
not going up the slide.
100%.
So that was a very I was going to say very stressful experience. And then we got back, and I think I also remember we got back to the hotel room and like had lunch, and you literally slept for like 3 hours.
Oh, I never nap during the day.
Yeah, you like just straight up napped.
I was beat.
I was watching like Third Rock from the Sun or something and got back into that again. And it was just, but we were both just beat and like morally just defeated. I think that was the first time I was like, that was stupid. Like I shouldn't have done that.
You live and you learn.
Yeah, we learned for sure. The next day, luckily, was beautiful. I feel like we'll just go with Carrigan quick and we'll come back.
Yeah, it's a quick one.
Yeah, we ended up, not wanting to be fully defeated. I'm like, all right, well, it's supposed to be nice tomorrow. Let's go do Carrigan. And again, like, Owl's Head was long, but it's not particularly steep or anything. Like, it's not, I forget how many feet it is.
I think we were more just tired from it being rainy.
Just mentally exhausted.
It's just stressed.
More than anything. Yeah, so we redeemed ourselves with Carrigan. Carrigan ended up being a pretty nice day. It was a little foggy and cloudy, but it was more like clouds blowing in and out.
The clouds were really cool on that hike, I remember. Just the way they were hanging and how they kind of just started blowing over.
Oh, yeah. It
gave us nice views.
So Carrigan, I think most people generally take like Signal Ridge Trail, and I don't forget if that goes to the summit or if it's a couple different trails you hop on. You end up going up its namesake Signal Ridge, which is actually, other than the tower that's on top of Carrigan, has like super nice views. I remember we kind of popped out and it was kind of clouded on Signal Ridge when we get up there. And by the time we got to the tower, it like cleared up with clouds blowing in and out. Like Ash said, it was beautiful. Like it wasn't like you could see like every single peak in the lights, but it just had this really cool, like very characteristically like mountain day, like clouds blowing in and out. Like it was kind of blue skies in between.
That was a cool hike.
Yep. Yeah, and that,
like night and day from
the
and
like
hike
it was
the day
just,
before.
Everything we had to, like, it's worth noting, everything we had was still like completely soaked. I think other than the clothes, I remember my boots were soaked and like our backpacks were pretty wet.
Yep.
Yeah, everything was, so it was a good thing that it was kind of a warm, dry day. Yeah, and a lot of people choose to finish on Carrigan because the tower that's on top of it, while the summit's like wooded, it's not even a fire tower, they're just like an observation tower, I think, on top of it. But from it, you can see, like, I forget what the number is, but it's from that summit in the Whites, you can see more 4,000 footers than any other summit because of various reasons. Because ones get blocked by higher summits and whatnot. And a lot of people choose to finish on it just because you can literally look upon, like, most of the 48 and, like, just kind of revel in that fact. So why it's a popular one to finish on. But we saved that for later. Our buddy Mike chose to finish on Carrigan. Like, that's definitely a really popular one. Mm-hmm. So that was our number 46. We redeemed. That's another long hike. Like it's probably 3,000 something feet, but it's like another like 10 miles. That's another one in the winter with Roadwalk. It turns into quite a long hike to try to do. But yeah, nothing too crazy. Like just kind of a grind. I don't remember it ever getting particularly steep, but it's just sustained steep for like a while.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So that was number 46. And I think I don't even know. It was probably like the next weekend or something.
we just wanted to get it done.
It was just, now I'm realizing we very much were in like I think we were hiking like at least every 2 weeks from May, pretty much all the way to the finish in September.
Or at least twice a month. Yeah.
Yeah, at least twice a month we were hiking. Yeah. So right now, just Owl's Head and South Kinsman remained, and we sure as hell weren't going to save Owl's Head for last. So we went out to do Owl's Head again. And we did it on another nice September day after sleeping at your cousin's house in Boston.
Yeah, we slept at Kaylee and Alex's house.
Friends of the podcast, Kaylee and Alex. We slept there, got up pretty early, but it's still like just leaving from Boston, it saves us like an hour or so probably. They
were very generous we ended up going
nice.
Up and hanging out and having dinner with them, and then we crashed there. It just made the commute to the hike a lot easier.
Yeah, and we chose to stay out in Lincoln for that night afterwards. But yeah, we went out to do Owl's Head, like completely different from the other day. It was like a pretty nice sunny day. The rivers were like not even nearly as high.
It was
like not
different.
not even an issue crossing these rivers and the branches of the Pemmy or Franconia Brooks and whatnot. Yeah, just like night and day. That's the thing. I remember we got to the first river crossing and I was like, huh, okay.
Is this the same
easy.
place? Yeah.
And I did mention the Black Pond Bushwhack, but I think that dodges like 2 of the bigger crossings, which is why people do it now. Black Pond, I think, is just a worthy destination in its own right. I haven't been there. I've seen a lot of pictures of it. I've heard about it. But yeah, if you're going to do Owl's Head, I think most people do that now and don't do it the way we did it.
I think the way we did it was more popular at the time.
Yeah, it's just how it is. It's probably because All Trails has like the Black Pond Bushwhack one. That's the one everybody does now. Anywho, yeah, so we finally got to Owl's Head. We got to the base of the slide again, and we're like, okay, we're going up. And we did it. Had really good views from the base of the slide, or rather like halfway up the slide, sort of the top. Slide's very steep, like very not super ledgy, but just very scrambly, like little scree rock that kind of just got to watch out when you're going up it because it's just kind of slippery. And then I remember you pop back into the woods before the summit. It's like this little gully that just like goes straight up to the top of it. Mm-hmm. Owl's Head, make sure you go past the area. Again, like I'm just mentioning, but again, 5 years of time, stuff probably changes 4 or 5 years. They had relocated the summit to the northern knob of the mountain at one point, which I think wasn't too long before that. Maybe it was like the mid 2000s or something, but there was still an old like cairn / area where you pop out. So make sure you keep going past, like, I think it's like to the left to the true summit. Again, I'm sure it's very well trodden by this point now. But when we went, I remember like if you just got up there and it was enough where if nobody else was up there and you didn't know about it, like I remember getting up there and being like, it looked like we were at the spot. And
I remember too, there was quite a few people doing Owl's Head that day because it was a nice day. Yeah. Like we saw a number of other people there. And
we mentioned the teal goat when we saw him at Cabot. He's actually, I believe, the trail maintainer for...
Or was at the time,
Franconia Brook Trail, which I think the Owl's Head Spur, which is a herd path, unmaintained trail off of it. He was out doing maintenance, and we actually crossed him again and kind of chatted with him. And he kind of let us know one factoid that I didn't know is that before the trees grew back in as much, the normal way to do, and before like the Lincoln Woods Trail was constructed and stuff, and the Kank became a thing, Owl's Head used to actually be done by people going up to Franconia Ridge and dropping down the Lincoln Slide and actually going to Owl's Head that way and then going back out. So just kind of a different area, because I guess back then it was easy enough that you could literally look at Owl's Head and be like, oh, it's up there. Like, let's keep going. But since the forest has grown back in, it's become less common to do it that way. But he was a badass and did it that way that day. And he was doing trail maintenance. And then he hiked back out. And he beat us probably up and down.
Oh, yeah.
Which was insane.
I remember at one point we were going up the steep section.
We kept up with him a good bit.
Yeah. Well,
going up Owl's Head.
He was kind of behind us. Like, he was kind of like, oh, you guys go ahead. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And I remember he was behind us. And when we were going up the steep section, I knew he was behind me. He wasn't following me super closely, like the dad and the son and when we did Liberty and Flume. But I knew he was behind me, and I don't know if I got like a little intimidated, so I just was like hoofing it, like just trying to get up. And then I remember literally being like, I couldn't catch my breath for like a minute or two. But
we kept pace, but like we're gonna throw up
barely. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was cool chatting and stuff, and gave us a little background on Owl's Head, and that's definitely a bucket list thing that I'd like to do with someone that probably knew it a little bit more formally, but like go up to Franconia Ridge and like hike down the drainage and like go out to Owl's Head that way. It just seems like it'd be a lot more fun than actually doing it the other way. Other than the fact that you go back, or I think a lot of people do that now, and then they'll go out via like the Lincoln Woods Trail. That would be
such a long hike.
Not really. I bet it's shorter mileage actually, because you kind of cut out. You don't have to go like north to south like twice.
That's
I don't know.
True,
that'd be an interesting thing to look at. But yeah, we finally get up Owl's Head, completely wooded summit. I think we ate lunch on the slide below just because you could see stuff. Really interesting views looking up to the Lincoln Slide and kind of the area between like Liberty and Mount Lincoln and stuff, and you can see that whole backside of Franconia Ridge, which is just kind of neat. The rivers behaved themselves. It wasn't scary. It was a lot more relaxing.
Very different, yes.
We like cranked it out too. I remember the flat portions. We're done. Yeah.
Yeah, just want to get out of here. Yeah.
So next, I think we actually closed on our house like right before, but I think that was still September. Last weekend of September, maybe.
Yeah. I probably have the date somewhere.
Yeah.
But it was
I have a sheet with on. I can actually look at it if I can find South Kinsman really quick. 9/22/19. So yeah, near the last week of September. We
closed on our house after that.
So a little bit after that. So again, we were kind of scrambling around. I think we wanted to finish, and it was just like, let's just go chill out and like not worry about house stuff right now. We're like in denial that we're gonna have to pack and do all this stuff. We get a beautiful September day, and it's fine. I remember when we finished Owl's Head, like we came back for a friend's birthday party and stuff, and I was like we should just stay up and just do South Kinsman the next day and just drive home. And you were like, we have to go back, and I was like, okay, got talked into it. But I wanted to stay up. For the record, I wanted to stay up that same weekend and just finish South Kinsman.
I know,
but we had to wait.
So if you're still with us, how long have we been talking now? Like 2 hours?
I don't know.
So we're at number 48.
Yeah, so we got a beautiful day, and we just did a day trip up there. I think we were just super excited, so like being tired wasn't even an issue.
No, we stayed over at a hotel in Lincoln. Remember?
Did we?
Yeah, we stayed over at the hotel.
I thought we drove back home after we did South Kinsman. I think you're thinking of Owl's Head.
Maybe. Yeah. I remember waking up that morning already being in New Hampshire. Like I remember waking up and being like, oh my God, it is a perfect morning. It was like
maybe.
dry
I'll have
and
to think about
sunny. I think we drove home after. I think we stayed up at, you know how when you first get off the highway in Lincoln, there's that like, I don't know if it's a Hilton or an Marriott.
We stayed at like the Holiday Inn or something.
Holiday Inn, whatever.
Right.
I remember.
No, I remember because they had the Highland Games, which is coming up probably like this weekend actually up there. And I remember seeing guys in kilts and shit, and I was like, all right.
Yeah. But I remember we woke up the next morning and I was like, oh my God, it was like a perfect day.
Yes, it was definitely a perfect day. But yeah, so we set out and we're going to do it the same way. Like you can approach South Kinsman and the Kinsmans from different areas, but we did it the same way.
We purposefully wanted to do it the same way.
Lonesome Lake Trail. We went around Lonesome Lake to Fish and Jimmy, went up across the Kinsman Ridge Trail, eventually get to North Kinsman. Beautiful day, beautiful views. You could see like all of Franconia Ridge in front of us. It was kind of the opposite of when we were up there the first time, where it was clouded and you could just see Lonesome Lake. And we made our way up and down and then over to South Kinsman, which South Kinsman has like this thing that's sort of like a throne on it that you can sit at, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that was cool. That's where we sat with we, people will do different things to kind of celebrate.
Some people are very extra with their celebrations, but I think we kept it pretty chill.
We did. So yeah, some people will have like signs, they'll like wear things, they'll do different things to kind of celebrate finishing the 48. I ended up making us just these kind of simple NH48 signs that we each held up.
Yep.
And then we each brought up kind of like our own drink of choice to enjoy. I remember I brought up like a mini champagne, which might not have been the best idea because it was like 10 o'clock in the morning and I was a little buzzed going down, but
we finished the 48.
Yeah, it was much deserved.
Yeah, I remember I brought like a Lord Hobo beer. I remember specifically for some reason. We did it. It was kind of crazy. We hiked back down and like I don't know. I remember feeling too. It's like kind of a weird feeling, but I think already by this point, like I was starting to get aware of other lists. So I don't want to say it wasn't as like a big deal finishing as I thought it was going to be, but I think like a lot of people end up hiking the list. Like it usually doesn't stop with the list. You're like,
no.
Like I started to learn about the 52 with a view by this point. Like we had repeated multiple like Franconia Ridge several times. Again, Tom Field Willie, like we had kind of figured about the winter list and started doing that and kind of appreciating that and like wanting to do winter hikes more. So I don't think we ever for a second were like, well, if anything, we're like, okay, now it's on to the New England 67 4,000
yeah,
footers.
It wasn't like this is the end or anything like that. I mean, it was definitely still a huge accomplishment and like, a great feeling to be able to finish, especially since we really pushed it the last couple months. And, we had that goal set like by the end of 2019. So it definitely felt great to finish. But yeah, I mean, we knew it wasn't going to be like, okay, now we're done. We're retired or whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I just remember sitting on South Kinsman and kind of looking out, and it's cool to like think of all the different places you've been.
Oh yeah, and kind of to come like full circle, really. Like we got to like revisit North Kinsman again. We got to kind of be like, okay, what is Fishing Jimmy like now after we're in better hiking shape and we have more perspective? And I mean, it definitely was still a respectable, decent hike, but
it wasn't like ridiculous.
No, but it was just interesting to be like, oh, this how far we've come, and how the hike felt.
Yeah, so thanks for listening. If you listen to all our journey, I'm sure we'll have more hiking topics, and I definitely want to get into like sort of our experiences hiking the Adirondacks and stuff like that. So let us know if you enjoyed that. Any sort of final finishing thoughts from the 48 journey? Other than that, we got tattoos on our wrists.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention
NH48.
that. Yeah, we both have little tattoos on our wrists that say NH48 to kind of like.
And I'm aware too that
honor
like
that experience.
I'm totally aware that the official list name is like the White Mountains 4,000 footers, but like nobody actually calls it that. I think most people call it the New Hampshire 48 4,000 footers. And I think too, like part of the tattoo thing is like, it's not just about like the number in the mountains and the accomplishments, but it's like all the friends and family that we like shared hiking with and like different people we stayed with that didn't necessarily hike, like learning all these different areas in the Whites, which in New Hampshire in general, like the 52 with a view, I'm really learning to expand your horizons even more as far as the mountains in New Hampshire and everywhere and like the different areas. Yeah, I feel like by the time you finish the 48, you really get a feel for like the different types of terrain and like the different types, like the northern presidentials and the lakes region and like Moosilauke and like all these different peaks and kind of the feel of the terrain and the forest and stuff. And like that to me is like really the significance. Like we did it together, which was super cool.
Yeah. I mean, minus that one hike that
minus Washington.
But
my first time.
We still did it together. And I mean, definitely couldn't have done it without you. Like you, I mean, you were the main planner in every hike. And I just kind of was like, all right, I trust you. Let's do this. And
thank you.
I'll follow. And
yeah, and we did submit our lists and letters to get the patches and stuff with the AMC. And they do check your stuff because they actually they noticed that my Mount Washington date was different than hers, and they asked why. And I was like, oh, because I did it separately before her. Because they noticed that you did Washington Monroe at one time.
We submitted our stuff together.
And you have to mention who you're with when you submit it.
Yes.
Too.
You mentioned
so like
the
they
date,
saw,
who
so
you're
he
with.
so they kind of question that. So yeah, they do pay attention to that stuff when you submit those things, and someone literally does go through and read it.
And it was cool too. You got to kind of write
and you get to write a letter. Yeah,
you wrote a letter about like, I mean, I don't think it had to be about any specific thing. I think you just had to write about like a standout hike or an experience or something like that. And I think I wrote about our Owl's Head experience. I want to say.
I'm trying to think
I have
what
the
I wrote
letter
about.
somewhere. I'm sure.
I think I actually wrote about when we did Liberty and Flume the first time. But yeah, it was really cool. I encourage anybody to do it and get into it.
And take your time. You don't have to do it in like 5 years like we did.
The resources, even compared to one in 2014 when we started hiking the list like officially, it's kind of crazy. Like I feel like it's just a plentiful amount of resources now.
It's definitely become a lot more popular for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure
which
there's
is good.
a lot
Which
more
is good.
finishers.
I mean, and there's some people who are probably like, I want the mountains to myself. And like, don't get me wrong, I love like having peaks and stuff to myself. But like, it's good that people are out there and hopefully learning more about nature and appreciating nature a little bit more and appreciating these mountains, and in turn, hopefully just preserving them so that they stay like this for generations to come. So yeah, so that was our journey hiking the New Hampshire 48. And I realized I forgot it earlier, so I think we just got to get into Nick's music moment, and then we'll head into the sound. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, here goes Nick's music moment for episode 13. I prepared these ahead of time today, too, so I'm on the ball.
Good for you.
All right, so the first song, which I'm a little bit bitter about because I tried to use it in a YouTube video of Monroe earlier this year, and it got ripped down because evidently whoever owns this music doesn't want you to use it. Totally understandable. I'm a musician, or I kind of get it. But the song is Quietly by Manchester Orchestra, and the EP is called The Valley of Vision. It's just a really chill song. I really love Manchester Orchestra. I've seen them live a few times. This is sort of an EP I think they did like in conjunction with a short film. Maybe why the copyright thing became such an issue when I used it. But yeah, just a really cool song, really pretty vocals, and a little bit different from Manchester Orchestra. It's not like super hard or anything like that. It kind of builds really nicely, very sort of ethereal sort of vibe. The next one is called Forever Chemicals by Placebo, and it's off the album Never Let Me Go. This is a new album that came out by Placebo. I've loved them since I was probably like a teenager and stuff. I think they had their songs in like the old SSX games, the snowboarding games on like PlayStation and stuff. So got to go see them live finally with a friend of the podcast, Nate, last year, or earlier this year rather. And yeah, they were really awesome. It's the first song off it called Forever Chemicals. The next one, Ashley's heard me play this album a bunch, so she can attest that I really like this album and this song, but it's Angelica by the band Wet Leg. Really just cool song. Like I love this song a lot. It feels almost like a B-52 song or something, like some sort of like old kind of 80s punk rock sort of song, but wicked good. The album's wicked good. I think I mentioned it on our music episode. Keeps coming back around to me, really hoping they come out with some new music soon, because I think they're a really talented band. They got a lot of stuff going for them, so hopefully we see some more from them. The next one is Stare at the Sun by Thrice, who's one of my favorite bands. And I did throw this out, even though the original one of this is pretty old. They actually revisited their album for an anniversary. The album was The Artist in the Ambulance, big album, probably when we were in middle school and stuff. And yeah, Stare at the Sun is probably like the first song that really like turned me on to music and wanted to go out and buy like a CD and an album. So this one goes back to me. The revisited version of it's a little bit more raw. It's cool to hear Dustin Kensrue's vocals now versus when he was like a young, like middle-aged 20-year-old. So it's kind of a cool contrast. Just one I really like. It's just a punk pop song, so pretty straightforward. I think most people would like it if you're into sort of like pop rock. And the last one is Discoloration by the band Dawn Golden and the album Still Life. This one I heard off of Shameless. I think it was in a Shameless episode.
Oh,
so
really?
Yeah, it's like basically an EDM song. I haven't thrown too many EDM songs out yet, but it's just kind of a really chill song. It has a really neat like breakdown and chorus to it. Very catchy. If you're into like EDM, it's not like it's like dubstep or anything like that. It's just kind of like pop EDM, but really good. So check it out. So that's Nick's music moment of the week for episode 13. And let's head into the descent. Get anything you want to plug this week? My podcasting guru or movie guru?
So we're about to enter September, which means fall is coming, which is my absolute favorite time of year. I become very basic in the fall. I love my pumpkin spice.
I become very basic in the fall.
Oh yes, I love all that stuff. So they keep doing it earlier and earlier every year. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, but Starbucks and Dunkin' already have their pumpkin spice flavors out. Again, I feel like every year they just do it a little earlier and earlier. But
they have Halloween decorations out in like July now.
I see that's too much, but
maybe
yeah,
not July, but it's pretty early.
If you like pumpkin spice, you can already get it at Dunkin' and Starbucks, and I just cannot wait for the fall. And I have like certain movies I love to watch this time of year, and
yeah, we legitimately have a list of Halloween movies that we start going through.
Yes,
I also like you like more like horror movies. I also like to I'm like a nerd, and I like watching like New England's legends and like old PBS specials on just like historical like haunted New England and stuff.
I like that stuff too.
That's
but
my
yeah,
jam.
I love like the old like horror movies. Like we watch John
Halloween.
Carpenter's Halloween on Halloween every year. I absolutely love it. I love like the old like Friday the 13th movie and just Creep Show and all those old movies. So I cannot wait to start watching those.
I like the Halloween Charlie Brown.
Yes,
it's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown.
That's a classic.
It's probably one of my favorites. Can't wait to watch that with Rylan.
Just very excited for that time of year to come, and excited that you can already get pumpkin coffee.
You can put up the Halloween lights.
Yes.
We have a lot of fall decorations.
We do.
Probably more so than most holidays.
We probably go the most hard on Halloween and Christmas, but I feel like that's most people.
We go hard.
Yeah.
I don't know if we go hard, but we have orange lights and stuff.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's always a good time. Yeah, anything else besides fall coming up? Or?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I have much to... I was going to plug, like, I'm like a closet skateboard nerd because I used to skateboard. And Josh is probably going to listen to this and be like, of course you used to skateboard. Nick has so many hobbies. One YouTube and / podcast I watch, it is a podcast. They also have a YouTube channel. I tend to watch it on YouTube more, but the 9 Club is like, they do a lot of skateboarding industry related things. So I'll like just kind of delve into them every once in a while and listen to skaters talk and stuff. I find they're basically artists really, and like it's interesting hearing their mindset and like a lot of interesting stories and stuff from people. So if you've ever been into skateboarding, like Tony Hawk and all that jazz, or grew up playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater, know some of these names, like, and ever fantasized, like I feel like I live vicariously through listening to these people, but it is genuinely interesting. So the 9 Club, I'm gonna plug that out there. And I think that's really it. And this has been a super long episode. So,
yes, thanks
again for listening to us.
Yes, thanks for listening to us ramble about hiking.
Hopefully it's enjoyable and useful. If you have any questions about hiking, I wouldn't consider ourselves experts, but we've definitely hiked a bit at this point. We'll have to do some other episodes following up on maybe similar to this and with Josh, where we talk about sort of hiking the Adirondacks. I'm like halfway through the winter 48 now. I'm almost through that. I'm good chunk of the way. I'm 42 out of 52 for the 52 with a view, like I mentioned on the last episode, if you're into that list. So if you have any questions about hikes or routes or things like that on things we've done, like by all means, like reach out to us, hit us up on Instagram, or hit me up at Nick's Hikes and Plays Guitar on Instagram or whatever. Ashley is just like A.E. Sidla if you want to follow her or whatever and see. She's probably just posting lots of cat stuff most of the time, or coffee stuff. She's giving me a weird look.
Mostly our child.
yeah, mostly our child now. But yeah, hit us up. We're out there. There's tons of resources, I should say, online now too. But yeah. So till next time, till Josh comes back, and Ash will again be hanging out, waiting for our next opportunity to be on the podcast.
Can't wait.
All right. Do you wanna send us out? The cat's scratching at the door. I think Moose really wants to get in. Our cat's name is also Moose, named after Moose Lock. We call her Munchie, though. Bye.
Bye.
You're like, I don't know what to do. Bye.
How long was that episode? Like 2.5 hours? Jesus. I was like looking at my watch. It's been over 2 hours.
PUDs Podcast was produced and recorded in Black Cat Studios by the Pud Boys. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving us a review and subscribing. Find us on social media, and we'll see you next time.